Welcome, fearless wanderers, to the rugged, wind-swept coasts of Alaska, where towering cliffs meet the icy sea and storms rage across endless horizons. Here, lighthouses rise like sentinels, guiding ships through treacherous waters. But not all keepers leave when their shifts are over. Tonight, we explore the 25 haunted lighthouses in Alaska, where keepers never left, where ghostly figures pace the cliffs, lamps light without reason, and the cries of long-lost sailors echo across the waves. These lighthouses are more than beacons. They are trapped in time, haunted by tragedy, and watched over by spirits who never departed. Cape Spencer Lighthouse stands at the edge of Prince William Sound, perched precariously on a jagged cliff that plunges into the icy waters below. Its whitewashed walls and towering lantern room have guided countless ships through fog and storm. But it is the stories of the unseen that have drawn visitors for decades. The lighthouse's remote location and storm-lashed cliffs create a haunting backdrop, and locals speak in hushed tones about the spectral phenomena said to occur here. From phantom footsteps to flickering lights and ghostly figures, Cape Spencer has earned a reputation as one of Alaska's most haunted maritime sites. Visitors first notice the isolation. The lighthouse is reachable only by boat or a treacherous hike along the cliffside trail, with the sound of crashing waves echoing through the rocks. Even on clear days, the wind howls along the cliffs, carrying the scent of salt and the distant cries of seabirds. But it is after dusk, when the fog rolls in, that the lighthouse seems to awaken. Tourists and lighthouse enthusiasts often report hearing a deep foghorn echoing across the sound. Though the foghorn itself has long been decommissioned, the sound is mournful and commanding, reverberating off the cliffs as if signaling to unseen vessels, or perhaps calling to the spirits that linger on the cliffs. Inside the lighthouse, the stories grow more personal. Visitors describe hearing footsteps on the spiral stairs when no one else is present. Some swear they have seen shadowy figures pacing the lantern room, the topmost chamber, where the light once guided ships through stormy waters. The figures are often described as tall, uniformed, and precise in their movements, as though performing duties long since obsolete. One visitor reported seeing a man in a weathered coat and hat, carefully polishing the brass fixtures of the lamp, only to turn and vanish when approached. The impression left behind is one of diligence and devotion, a keeper committed to his duty even in death. Lights inside the tower have also behaved strangely. Visitors often report lamps and lanterns flickering without cause, bulbs glowing briefly before extinguishing themselves. Some claim the lights swing or pulse rhythmically, as though signaling messages to the sea. During storms, the flickering intensifies, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. Hikers near the base of the cliffs have seen the lantern beam sweeping across the fog, though the lighthouse itself has been unstaffed for decades. The phenomenon has led many to believe the keeper's spirit still tends to the tower, ensuring that the light never fails, even after death. The cliffs and surrounding waters are also said to harbor ghostly sailors. Cape Spencer has a long history of shipwrecks, with treacherous rocks and sudden storms claiming vessels through the years. Visitors report seeing figures on the rocks below, some climbing toward the lighthouse, others seemingly stranded mid-step, as if frozen in time. On calm nights, faint voices can be heard, carried by the wind shouts, cries, and the lapping of waves that seem too purposeful to be natural. Some hikers have felt an unshakable chill, as though a presence brushed past them, and cameras occasionally capture inexplicable streaks of light or shadows moving against the rocks. The lighthouse itself has maintained an aura of solitude and vigilance. Even when unoccupied, it seems to possess a life of its own. Doors open and close unexpectedly, and the spiral staircase can creak as though someone is ascending, despite being empty. Some visitors have reported the smell of tobacco or sea brine lingering in the air, a reminder of the keeper's long years at the post. These small, intangible details compound the feeling that Cape Spencer is a place out of time, where the living are watched and guided by spirits who cannot leave. Several personal accounts illustrate the unnerving nature of the lighthouse. One sailor recounted anchoring near the cliffs during a dense fog. He swore he saw the lantern beam sweep across the water, illuminating a figure waving to him from the top of the lighthouse. When he attempted to dock, he found the structure empty, the beam extinguished, and no trace of anyone on the cliffs. Another visitor, a photographer, described a series of images captured from the trail below. In each photo, a shadowy figure appeared near the lantern room, its position slightly different in every shot, as if moving unseen along the spiral stairs. Cape Spencer's reputation is reinforced by local lore. Residents speak of the lighthouse keeper, who vanished mysteriously decades ago, leaving no record of departure. Some claim he perished in a storm, while others insist he remained to protect the ships from beyond the grave. In either case, the stories agree that his presence endures. Fishermen and hikers in the area sometimes report hearing instructions called out in a stern voice. Warnings to avoid the cliffs or to steer clear of rocks that have claimed so many ships. Whether this is a spirit or the wind playing tricks, the accounts are consistent and chilling. Despite or perhaps because of its eerie reputation, Cape Spencer Lighthouse attracts a steady stream of visitors. Some are drawn by the maritime history, the dramatic views of Prince William Sound, or the isolation of the rugged cliffs. Others come specifically to experience the paranormal, carrying cameras, audio recorders, and an eagerness to witness something otherworldly. Many leave with stories of their own, fleeting glimpses of a shadowed figure, the sound of phantom footsteps, or the inexplicable flicker of a light where no electricity flows. Cape Spencer remains a place where the natural and supernatural meet. The wind carries whispers of the past, the fog cloaks secrets, and the cliffs bear silent witness to centuries of tragedy and devotion. Visitors report the presence of the lighthouse keeper, dutiful even in death, patrolling the lantern room, ensuring that the light never fails. Shadows flit across the walls, ghostly foghorns call from the sound, and spectral figures wander the rocks below. For those who come after dark, Cape Spencer Lighthouse is not simply a relic of maritime history, it's a living memory, haunted by those who once walked the cliffs and watched the sea. Eldred Rock Lighthouse stands defiant in the frigid winds of Alaska's Lynn Canal, its weathered walls and rusted railings a monument to both endurance and tragedy. Built in 1905 after a series of devastating shipwrecks, it was meant to be a beacon of safety for passing vessels. Yet over time, the lighthouse itself became a source of unease. Surrounded by icy waters, isolated by storms, and haunted by tales of death at sea, Eldred Rock has earned a reputation as one of the most haunted places along Alaska's coast. Even from a distance, the lighthouse seems otherworldly. The waves crash against the jagged rocks below, sending sprays of frozen mist into the air. The sound of the wind howling through the metal framework of the tower can resemble a chorus of distant voices. Mariners traveling through the canal often report seeing flickering lights along the cliff's phantom, lanterns that vanish when approached. Some say they've seen shadowy figures pacing the catwalk at night, even though the lighthouse has been automated and unoccupied for years. According to legend, one of the earliest tragedies that gave birth to Eldred Rock's haunted reputation occurred long before the light was built. In 1898, the steamship Clara Nevada exploded nearby, sinking within minutes and killing everyone aboard. Locals still tell stories of bodies washing ashore, frozen and disfigured by the cold. For months afterward, fishermen claimed to see strange lights moving beneath the waves. And to this day, divers report hearing faint knocking sounds when exploring the wreck. Many believe the souls of those who perished that night still wander the waters near Eldred Rock, drawn to the lighthouse's faint glow as if seeking refuge. Inside the lighthouse, the air feels perpetually cold, even in midsummer. The corridors echo with an unsettling rhythm, footsteps that seem to move just ahead or behind, always out of sync with one's own. Former keepers documented their experiences in logs that have since become part of the legend. One entry, dated 1912, describes the keeper waking to the sound of heavy boots climbing the stairs to his room. When he opened the door, no one was there. Another entry tells of hearing soft weeping from the base of the tower during a storm. The next morning, the area was covered in fresh snow except for a single line of wet footprints leading to the water's edge. The keeper's quarters, now empty and decaying, remain the center of most ghostly encounters. Visitors describe hearing whispers coming from the bedrooms, as if two voices are speaking in low, urgent tones. Some claim to hear their own names whispered from the shadows, the sound rising above the wind. Objects move when no one is near. Stairs scrape across the floor, doors swing open, and light fixtures sway gently as if disturbed by unseen hands. On several occasions, explorers have reported seeing faces in the windows, pale, expressionless visages staring out toward the sea before vanishing into darkness. Perhaps the most chilling story comes from a small group of Coast Guard technicians sent to inspect the lighthouse in the late 1970s. According to their account, as night fell and the storm intensified, they began hearing footsteps above them, pacing the catwalk in steady rhythm. When one of them climbed the stairs to investigate, the footsteps stopped. Moments later, a loud banging echoed from below, as if something or someone was slamming the main door shut. They spent the rest of the night in silence, too afraid to move until dawn. When they finally stepped outside, they found the door wide open, snow undisturbed around it. None of them returned to Eldred Rock again. Locals in nearby Inn and Skagway still speak of the lighthouse with quiet reverence. They say the fog around the island seems thicker, darker, and colder than anywhere else in the canal. Fishermen report hearing a distant foghorn long after it was decommissioned. Others swear that when they pass near the rock at night, they can see the faint glow of lanterns swaying in the upper windows, and a lone figure moving along the outer deck, keeping vigil as the waves crash below. Even those who don't believe in ghosts admit there's something unnatural about Eldred Rock. The storms seem to gather faster there. The sea churns with unusual force, and the air hums with an energy that feels alive. Some say the spirits of the Clara Nevada's crew have merged with the island itself, bound eternally to the lighthouse that was meant to prevent their fate. Others believe the isolation drove past keepers to madness, their restless souls now trapped within the tower's narrow walls. Cape St. Elias Lighthouse stands on the rugged cliffs of Kayak Island, overlooking the relentless waves of the Gulf of Alaska. Its weathered structure has endured decades of storms, salt spray, and icy winds, standing as a solitary sentinel against the harsh elements. Though abandoned for many years, the lighthouse continues to be a source of fascination and fear for those who venture near. Tales of ghostly figures, unexplained lights, and mysterious sounds have earned Cape St. Elias a reputation as one of Alaska's most haunted maritime landmarks. Visitors often approach the lighthouse by boat, navigating treacherous waters that have claimed countless vessels over the years. The cliffs rise sharply from the sea, and the structure of the lighthouse appears impossibly isolated, perched atop jagged rock with nothing but the ocean surrounding it. Even in daylight, the lighthouse exudes an eerie presence, but it is at night that the tales grow chilling. Those who have stayed near the island report seeing lights glowing from the lantern room. Despite the lighthouse having no caretaker for decades, the lamp, which should have long since gone dark, seems to burn as if tended by unseen hands. Once inside, visitors describe a sense of being watched. The stairwell leading to the lantern room creaks under invisible weight, and some report glimpsing shadowy figures climbing the steps just ahead of them. Others hear footsteps echoing through the corridors when no one else is present. The air is often cold and damp, more frigid than the surrounding weather, and some feel sudden gusts of wind brush against them as if someone or something is passing by. The experience is both unsettling and hypnotic, drawing the curious further into the lighthouse despite an instinctive fear of the unknown. The lantern room itself is said to be the epicenter of paranormal activity. Those who have reached the top describe flickering lights and the sensation that the space is alive with unseen energy. Shadows appear along the walls and railings, often forming shapes resembling the original keepers in old-fashioned uniforms. Some visitors claim the spirits move deliberately, as if performing their nightly duties, checking the lamp, scanning the horizon, or adjusting the mechanisms that once guided countless ships safely through the waters. There is a palpable sense of vigilance, as if the spirits cannot rest until their task is complete. Visitors frequently recount auditory phenomena that defy explanation. The soft click of the lamp gears, the The scrape of boots along the metal steps and muffled whispers echo through the halls. Some have reported hearing conversations, distant and fragmented, in voices that sound like old-time mariners discussing weather, tides, and the perils of the sea. Others say they can hear the faint hum of the lamp itself, as though it is burning tirelessly, tended by hands that no longer exist in the living world. Outside the lighthouse, the cliffs and surrounding terrain add to the sense of unease. The ocean crashes violently against the rocks, and fog often rolls in without warning, enveloping the island in a thick, impenetrable mist. Within this fog, visitors report seeing figures pacing the cliff edges, watching over the water. The shadows appear and vanish as the fog shifts, leaving an unsettling impression that the spirits are surveying the sea, endlessly vigilant against danger. Some have claimed that ghostly lanterns bob along the shoreline, reminiscent of the lights that once guided ships to safety, appearing where no living hand has lit them. Personal accounts lend weight to the lighthouse's haunted reputation. One mariner anchored nearby reported hearing the distant clang of a bell and the creak of footsteps on the stairwell, only to see nothing when he peered through his binoculars. Another explorer who spent the night in a small tent on the island awoke to the sensation of unseen eyes following her movements, catching glimpses of shadows at the edge of the lantern light. Some visitors report waking to find objects, such as tools or lanterns, shifted from their original positions, as though handled by invisible hands. Stories passed down from local lore speak of the original keepers who manned Cape St. Elias during its operational years. These men endured isolation, harsh weather, and the ever-present threat of shipwrecks along the cliffs. Some accounts suggest that the spirits of these keepers never left, bound to the lighthouse by duty or tragedy. Witnesses claim that the spectral keepers continued their nightly routines, climbing the stairwell, tending the lamp, and scanning the horizon as if they were alive. The sense of purpose attributed to these apparitions makes their presence both unnerving and oddly protective, as if they remain vigilant to prevent further maritime disasters. The surrounding island amplifies the otherworldly atmosphere. The cliffs, jagged and unforgiving, echo with the roar of the surf, which seems to carry faint whispers in the wind. Fog and mist roll in from the sea, obscuring vision and distorting sound, creating an environment where the natural and supernatural merge. Many who have ventured to Cape St. Elias describe an overwhelming sensation of being watched, an invisible presence that is patient and persistent, observing every movement while remaining just out of reach. Cape St. Elias Lighthouse remains a beacon, both literal and spectral, standing against the harsh Alaskan elements. Its history, isolation, and numerous accounts of ghostly sightings make it a compelling destination for those intrigued by the paranormal. The lighthouse is not merely an abandoned building, it's a place where the past lingers, where the spirits of former keepers continue their eternal vigil. Shadows move in the stairwell, lights flicker in the lantern room, and whispers float through the corridors. For those who venture near, Cape St. Elias is a haunting reminder that some duties and some spirits can never rest. Sentinel Island Lighthouse rises defiantly from the jagged rocks of Frederick Sound, its whitewashed walls battered by relentless waves and icy winds. The lighthouse has guided mariners for decades, warning of hidden reefs and treacherous currents. Yet, long after its official keepers abandoned the station, the lighthouse has continued to attract stories of strange lights, eerie sounds, and ghostly figures. Visitors, sailors, and adventurous travelers alike speak of the island as a place where the living are never truly alone. Where the past lingers in every shadow and echo, the approach to Sentinel Island is never easy. Frederick Sound is known for sudden storms and thick, rolling fog that can reduce visibility to mere feet. Even experienced boaters report a strange heaviness in the air as they near the island, a tension that feels alive. Many claim that, as the fog thickens, faint lantern lights appear atop the lighthouse, glowing despite the absence of any human operator. Some describe the lights moving slowly up and down the tower as if guided by invisible hands, while others insist they have glimpsed figures silhouetted against the glow, dressed in old lighthouse keeper uniforms. These apparitions seem to perform tasks with a diligence that mirrors life. Winding lamps, checking equipment, and pacing the narrow walkways, maintaining a vigil that has lasted decades beyond death. Inside the lighthouse, visitors often feel a palpable sense of unease. The narrow stairwell creaks underfoot, yet sometimes footsteps echo above or below when no one else is present. Doors and hatches, long sealed, are occasionally found ajar, suggesting unseen movement. Some explorers report faint drafts, carrying the scent of salt water, oil lamps, and old wood, brushing past them as if a phantom presence passes nearby. The interior seems to respond to the living, almost aware of their presence, with flickering lights, sudden cold spots, and faint whispers that drift along the stone walls. Many have described voices calling names, fragments of conversations from long ago, often drowned in the roar of the surrounding surf. The Lantern Room is at the heart of Sentinel Island's paranormal reputation. Despite being decommissioned decades ago, the lamp itself seems to ignite on its own. Witnesses recount seeing the flame burn steadily, illuminating the glass panels and casting strange shadows across the narrow catwalk. Some claim to see the spectral keepers working silently, checking the gears and mechanisms, or gazing out to sea as if expecting a ship in peril. The devotion of these apparitions is unnerving, giving the sense that their duty transcends death, that they are bound to the lighthouse by a sense of responsibility that even time cannot undo. Surrounding the lighthouse, the rocky cliffs and turbulent waters contribute to the otherworldly atmosphere. Waves crash violently against the jagged rocks below, often sending salty mist high into the air. In this chaotic environment, the fog seems to move with a life of its own, swirling in unnatural patterns and occasionally revealing fleeting silhouettes along the cliffs. Witnesses often describe shadowy figures walking near the edge, standing motionless before vanishing into the haze. Some insist they have seen faint reflections of sailors standing on the rocks, reaching toward the lighthouse, as if seeking guidance or safety. Trapped forever between the living world and the depths below. Maritime folklore ties these spirits to the numerous shipwrecks in Frederick Sound. Over the decades, ships navigating these waters have foundered on hidden rocks, and countless sailors have perished. Local legends suggest that some of the lost souls return to the lighthouse, seeking the keeper's help, knocking on doors, or lingering in the fog. Visitors often recount the sound of ghostly taps and knocks echoing from the tower. Though no physical presence can be found, some describe hearing faint cries carried on the wind, mingling with the surf, as though the ocean itself is echoing the grief of those who perished. Many explorers have had personal experiences that defy explanation. One sailor, anchored nearby, reported seeing a group of shadowy figures walking along the catwalk of the lighthouse, their movements deliberate and synchronized, despite the absence of anyone alive on the island. Another visitor, spending the night in a small tent on the rocks, awoke to cold hands brushing against his shoulder and whispers calling his name from the fog. Objects left outside or on the stairwell were sometimes found shifted or moved, as if handled by unseen fingers. These encounters have led some to leave the island in haste, while others return, compelled by curiosity or a sense of reverence for the spirits who remain. The keepers of Sentinel Island, long gone from this world, are said to maintain a vigil that never ends. Their presence is often described as both unnerving and protective, as though they continue to guide ships and protect the waters from peril. The spectral figures are attentive to every sound, every movement, and every shadow. They seem to perform their duties methodically, ascending the stairwell, adjusting the lamp, or peering into the stormy waters. Even in the thickest fog, visitors report the feeling of being observed, followed, and guided simultaneously by presences that refuse to rest. The surrounding cliffs, the rocky coastline, and the ever-present fog amplify the isolation of the island, creating a place where the natural world and the supernatural intersect. Phantom lanterns float across the rocks. Shadows move independently of the moonlight, and the wind carries voices from another time. Those who venture to Sentinel Island often speak of the feeling that the lighthouse itself is alive, that it watches, listens, and reacts to the living with an awareness that is almost sentient. Cape Hinchinbrook, lighthouse stands alone at the edge of the Gulf of Alaska, rising from the rugged cliffs of Hinchinbrook Island like a silent sentinel. For more than a century, it has endured violent storms, relentless winds, and the isolation of one of the most treacherous coastlines in the Pacific. Built to guide ships through the perilous Hinchinbrook entrance, the lighthouse has also become a beacon for ghost stories and unsettling encounters. Long after its last keeper departed, the tower remains alive with echoes of the past, phantom footsteps, unexplainable sounds, and figures that appear only to dissolve into mist. The journey to Cape Hinchinbrook is no easy feat. Surrounded by dense fog and cold, churning waters, the island seems designed to keep visitors at a distance. Even from miles away, the lighthouse looms like a shadow against a gray sky. As boats approach the rocky shore, travelers often describe an eerie quiet, as if the world itself holds its breath. Then, almost on cue, the wind shifts, carrying faint cries that seem to come from the cliff's pleas for help that no one alive is making. Many who hear them believe they are the lingering echoes of shipwreck victims, sailors who perished trying to reach the safety of the light. Inside the lighthouse, the air feels charged, heavy with history and something unseen. The narrow spiral staircase that winds through the tower creaks and groans, the metal cool to the touch even on warmer days. Visitors who climb the steps often report hearing soft footsteps above them, measured, deliberate, pacing as though someone unseen walks the gallery deck. Yet, when they reach the top, the space is empty. Those who linger claim to see fleeting shadows move across the lantern room, shapes that twist and vanish when approached. Some describe the sensation of being watched, of eyes following them up the steps. The air growing colder with each turn of the spiral. The lighthouse keepers, who once manned Cape Hinchinbrook, lived lives of isolation and danger. Storms would batter the island for weeks, cutting them off from the mainland. Supplies ran low, and communication was often impossible. One story tells of a keeper who vanished during a storm in the 1930s. His logbook ended abruptly with the words, "The wind has found a voice tonight." When rescuers finally reached the island, the keeper was gone. No sign of a struggle, no body, only a half-eaten meal and an extinguished lamp. Since then, visitors have reported seeing a figure descending the spiral staircase late at night, a tall, gaunt shadow holding what looks like a lantern, though no light shines from it. Witnesses say this apparition moves with purpose, as if tending to a duty that death never released him from. The sound of boots on metal steps echoes through the tower, followed by the faint creak of a door opening somewhere below. Some have claimed to see the figure emerge briefly on the deck before disappearing into the mist. These encounters often leave witnesses shaken, certain that what they saw was no trick of the light. The apparition's movements are too deliberate, too human to dismiss as mere imagination. Outside, the environment amplifies the sense of dread. The constant fog seems to hold shapes that shift and dissolve, taking on ghostly forms before fading away. On still nights, when the sea is calm, the cries return, distant, and unmistakably human. Fishermen passing near the cape have reported hearing shouts for help coming from the cliffs, only to find nothing but empty waves and jagged rock. Others claim to see figures pacing along the lighthouse balcony, silhouettes backlit by flashes of lightning or the faint glow of the moon. The figures never wave, never move quickly, only walk in slow, endless circles, as though trapped in a loop of duty or despair. Inside the keeper's quarters, objects sometimes move on their own. Doors swing open without wind, old furniture creaks as if someone has just sat down, and lights flicker despite there being no power source. Visitors who spend the night often awaken to the sound of footsteps outside their doors, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone ascending the stairs. When they call out, there is no answer, only the faint whisper of the ocean and the metallic groan of the tower settling in the cold. Some claim to have heard low murmurs, indistinct words spoken in an old accent, as though the keepers still converse with one another through time. There are even reports of physical sensations, cold drafts that brush against the neck, invisible hands that seem to guide or push. One explorer, camping near the base of the tower, recounted waking in the middle of the night to the feeling of someone standing beside his sleeping bag. When he opened his eyes, he saw a shadow leaning over him, the outline of a man in a long coat, his face obscured by darkness. The figure turned and walked toward the water, vanishing before reaching the shore. The next morning, the man found a faint set of footprints in the sand leading nowhere. Local legends suggest the hauntings are not just residual echoes but intelligent presences. Some say the spirits are bound to the lighthouse, still carrying out their duties to guide ships safely through the fog. Others believe the apparitions are those of sailors who died before reaching the island, drawn to the light they never made it to in life. The cries for help that echo through the cliffs are said to belong to the drowned, their souls calling for rescue that will never come. Despite its reputation, Cape Hinchinbrook continues to draw explorers, historians, and the occasional thrill seeker. Many who visit leave with a deep respect for the place, a feeling that the lighthouse is more than stone and steel, that it's a vessel of memory. Even skeptics admit that something about the site feels different, as though the air itself carries the weight of countless untold stories. Point Retreat Lighthouse rises from the rocky cliffs of Admiralty Island, standing as a silent sentinel against the relentless tides of the Pacific. For over a century, it has guided ships through the foggy waters of Alaska's Inside Passage, warning sailors of hidden shoals and jagged rocks. But beyond its practical purpose, the lighthouse has long been associated with ghostly legends and unexplained phenomena. Boats navigating the channel often report a strange stillness near the cliffs, a hush that blankets the waves and muffles engines. Some sailors swear that, as they approach, they can hear faint cries carried by the wind, the echoes of sailors lost to the treacherous waters. Fog settles quickly in the area, thickening without warning, as if the island itself is alive, hiding secrets it does not want outsiders to see. Visitors arriving on foot describe a sense of foreboding that begins long before the lighthouse comes into view. The forested path leading to the station is littered with old timbers and driftwood, remnants of the many vessels that never made it past the rocky entrance. Hikers report sudden cold drafts that seem to come from nowhere, brushing against their necks and sending shivers down their spines. Some claim to hear footsteps behind them, slow and deliberate, that vanish whenever they turn to look. The air is dense, heavy with salt, decay, and the lingering weight of tragedies past. Inside the lighthouse, the atmosphere grows even more unsettling. The narrow spiral staircase that winds through the tower creaks with every step, metal railings cold to the touch even on warmer days. Those who climb it often speak of hearing footsteps above them, measured, purposeful, echoing as if someone unseen patrols the galleries. Some report seeing fleeting shadows on the walls, pale figures moving with the precision of the living, yet dissolving the moment one tries to approach. Lights flicker inexplicably, and the faint smell of oil or smoke sometimes lingers in the lamproom, though no fire burns. The history of Point Retreat is steeped in both heroism and tragedy. Lighthouse keepers endured long months of isolation, often cut off from supplies and communication. Storms battered the cliffs with relentless force, and shipwrecks were common along the coast. One particularly haunting tale tells of a keeper who vanished during a violent storm, leaving behind only his logbook and a lantern that still burned. Visitors and historians alike report seeing a tall, shadowy figure descending the spiral staircase at night, carrying what appears to be a lantern, though the lamp itself remains unlit. The figure moves deliberately, as though tending to duties that death did not release him from. Phantom footsteps are among the most commonly reported phenomena at Point Retreat. Guests have recounted walking through empty corridors only to hear boots on the floorboards above them, pacing in patterns too human to dismiss as the house settling. Some have tried calling out to the presence, receiving only the echo of their own voice or the faint whisper of a reply in an unfamiliar accent. At times, the air seems to chill dramatically, cold enough to see one's breath indoors, even when outside temperatures are mild. Some explorers claim the walls themselves seem to pulse, the sound of distant ocean waves mixing with the thrum of the unseen. Outside, the cliffs and shoreline are equally alive with strange activity. Fog often rolls in so thickly that the lighthouse disappears from view within moments, leaving visitors disoriented and unnerved. Shadowy figures have been seen pacing along the edge of the cliffs, their movements precise, almost mechanical, as if continuing a routine established in life. Mariners passing nearby sometimes report seeing faint lantern lights flashing from the tower, though the lighthouse is long automated and no keeper resides there. Others have described hearing faint shouts and cries, the sounds of men calling for help over the roar of the sea, fading as quickly as they appear. Some of the most chilling accounts involve the sensation of being watched. Visitors have felt invisible eyes tracking their movements along the gallery deck or across the shoreline. Objects occasionally move on their own books, shifting on tables, doors swinging open, or equipment in the keeper's quarters rattling without wind. Campers near the cliffs have reported feeling cold hands brush against their shoulders or the backs of their necks, moments that provoke sudden panic and immediate retreat from the area. The ghosts at Point Retreat are believed by many to be tied to duty and tragedy. Some think the spirits of former keepers remain, endlessly performing their rounds, ensuring the light is never abandoned. Others believe that sailors lost to the harsh waters linger, drawn to the beacon that failed them in life. The cries carried on the wind, the footsteps echoing along empty halls, and the shadowy figures moving with purpose all suggest lives interrupted, tasks unfinished, and souls bound to a place of peril and vigilance. Despite its reputation, the lighthouse continues to attract explorers, ghost hunters, and historians. Those who venture here leave with stories that defy explanation, often describing a weight in the air, a sense of presence, or an encounter that lingers long after leaving. Even the most skeptical visitors admit to a profound feeling of being watched, as if the past has not yet released its grip on the living. Ketchikan Lighthouse stands quietly on the rocky edge of Tungus's Narrows, a modest structure with a commanding presence over the turbulent waters of southeastern Alaska. Its whitewashed walls and iron lantern gleam in the daylight. But at night, the lighthouse transforms into something far more mysterious. Stories of disappearances, strange noises, and shadowy figures have long circulated among fishermen, locals, and the few visitors who venture to its isolated location. The fog that rolls in from the channel seems to carry whispers, and those who linger too long often speak of an overwhelming sense that the lighthouse is never truly empty. Accessing Ketchikan Lighthouse is a journey in itself. A narrow, rocky path winds down the bluff from the main road, often slick with moss and rain. The air is heavy with the scent of salt water, decaying wood, and the dense coastal forest that frames the lighthouse. As visitors approach, the wind seems to shift, bringing sudden chills even on relatively calm days. Many who have walked the path alone report hearing the deep clang of the foghorn. Though it is long automated and should not sound at night, the noise reverberates unnaturally across the channel, sending shivers through those who hear it, as if signaling the presence of someone or something watching. Inside the lighthouse, the atmosphere is markedly different from its utilitarian exterior. The spiral staircase that leads to the lantern room creaks under every step, and shadows seem to linger in the corners, moving subtly when no one is looking directly at them. Guests describe hearing footsteps above and behind them, though no other visitor is present. Sometimes the doors to small storage rooms swing open on their own, and objects that should remain fixed shift inexplicably. The air carries a faint smell of oil and seawater, mingled with something more pungent, almost like smoke, though no fire has burned in decades. The history of Ketchikan Lighthouse is intertwined with tragedy and unexplained vanity. Local lore recounts several disappearances over the years, from keepers who were never seen again to fishermen who visited the lighthouse for guidance and were never heard from afterward. Some say the spirits of these missing souls remain, drawn to the lantern that was meant to guide sailors safely through the treacherous Narrows. Witnesses frequently report seeing shadowy figures near the lantern room, sometimes peering down from the windows or pacing along the exterior walkway. These figures vanish when approached, leaving behind only the faint echo of hurried footsteps. One of the most unsettling experiences reported by visitors is the sensation of being followed. Guests recount moving through the small rooms or climbing the spiral staircase, only to feel a cold presence at their back. Whispers sometimes float through the air, unintelligible, yet insistent, calling names or issuing warnings. The faint glow of the lantern, even when unlit, seems to create shadows that move independently, elongating and shrinking as if the walls themselves are alive. Some visitors have described the feeling of being watched while standing on the observation platform, as though someone or something is observing their every move from the darkness just beyond the light. The foghorn, long automated, is another source of eerie reports. Several visitors claim to have heard its sound at odd hours, often followed by a deep vibration that seems to travel through the ground beneath their feet. In these moments, the lighthouse feels less like a structure and more like a sentient being, aware of its surroundings and communicating in cryptic signals. Those who investigate often find no logical explanation. The foghorn remains silent according to the official timers, yet the sound persists, echoing across the water and through the cliffside forest. On the surrounding grounds, the lighthouse continues its haunting influence. Some hikers report tripping over rocks that seem to shift underfoot, or feeling invisible hands brush against their arms as they near the lantern. Even experienced explorers describe a sudden, overwhelming sense of unease, as if the island itself is aware of their intrusion. Inside, the lantern room has its own legends. Visitors have reported seeing light flicker from the lamp long after it has been extinguished, and shadows seem to gather near the railing, forming shapes too deliberate to be accidental. Doors to the keeper's quarters swing open and shut without cause, and objects like logbooks, oil cans, or lanterns move inexplicably. Some guests have fled after witnessing a figure descend the spiral stairs, its features indistinct but undeniably human, leaving only the echo of hurried footsteps behind. Locals insist that this figure is the ghost of a former keeper, bound to the lighthouse by duty or tragedy, eternally tending a light that no longer requires care. The sense of presence is strongest at night. Fog rolls in thick from Tungaza's Narrows, swallowing the path and the surrounding trees. Lights from Ketchikan appear distant and dim, leaving the lighthouse isolated in an otherworldly landscape of mist, water, and cliffs. Witnesses speak of hearing whispers rising above the sound of the waves, and shadows that linger in the periphery of vision, disappearing when directly observed. Some explorers describe a sensation of being guided or perhaps herded by invisible hands, as if the spirits of the lighthouse are not content merely to exist, but to interact with the living. Cape Decision Lighthouse rises dramatically above the jagged cliffs of Lynn Canal, its weathered walls facing the relentless waves that crash below. By day, the lighthouse appears as a stoic sentinel, guiding ships safely through one of Alaska's most treacherous waterways. By night, however, the structure takes on a far more sinister reputation. Local lore tells of restless spirits tied to the lighthouse, remnants of keepers, shipwreck victims, and lost travelers, all unable to find peace. Witnesses have long reported ghostly lanterns flickering in the windows, footsteps echoing through empty corridors, and doors that slam violently without the slightest breeze. Those who linger near the lighthouse after dark often speak of an oppressive presence, as if unseen eyes are tracking their every movement. The approach to Cape Decision is isolated and treacherous. A narrow, rocky path winds along the cliff's edge, slippery from rain or fog. The air carries a salty temps from the canal below, mixed with the scent of old timber and rusting metal. Hikers and explorers have long noted an uneasy feeling as they climb toward the lighthouse, a sensation that grows stronger as the fog rolls in from the water. Many report hearing faint sounds before reaching the building itself, distant creaks of wood, soft whispers that seem to come from nowhere, and occasionally the deep groan of what sounds like the tower's lantern rotating. These noises often vanish upon closer inspection, leaving visitors questioning their own senses, yet the sense of being watched remains. Inside the lighthouse, the haunting intensifies. The spiral staircase to the lantern room seems to echo every footstep unnaturally, as though multiple people are climbing at once. Visitors describe cold drafts cutting across the otherwise enclosed rooms, and the faint smell of burning oil lingering, even though the lamp has been long decommissioned. Doors open and close without explanation, sometimes slamming shut so violently that they startle those present. Occasionally, objects are moved or toppled, as if an invisible hand has been at work. Some explorers swear they have seen shadowy figures pacing the rooms, vanishing when approached, leaving only a lingering chill and the echo of hurried footsteps. The lighthouse has a tragic history that feeds these ghostly accounts. Over the years, keepers and their families endured harsh weather, isolation, and numerous shipwrecks along the coast. Some disappeared mysteriously, while others were found dead under inexplicable circumstances. The most chilling stories involve shipwreck survivors who sought refuge at the lighthouse only to vanish before reaching its safety. Witnesses claim that these souls remained tethered to the structure, their unfinished business bound to the light that was supposed to guide them home. Locals tell of nights when the fog thickens and the wind dies, and visitors see lanterns glowing where no one stands, as though a spectral keeper is patrolling the grounds. The lantern room itself is a focal point of paranormal activity. Visitors often report seeing light flicker in the glass panels, despite the lamp being extinguished. Some describe shadowy figures leaning over the railing or pacing the perimeter, disappearing as soon as someone approaches. In some cases, explorers claim to have seen multiple figures, sometimes resembling the shapes of keepers in old uniforms, moving with purpose as though performing nightly duties. The faint sound of chains clanging or metal scraping against wood has been reported by several witnesses, echoing eerily across the stone floors. These sounds are often accompanied by cold drafts, even when the structure is tightly sealed against the elements. On stormy nights, Cape Decision Lighthouse becomes especially foreboding. High winds whip through the surrounding cliffs, rain lashes against the windows, and the sea below churns violently. Visitors recount seeing figures standing at the tower's edges, silhouetted against lightning flashes, or pacing within the lantern room while the storm rages outside. Doors slam with such force that some have fled the building, convinced that the spirits are attempting to drive them out. The fog and storm seem to amplify the haunting, blending natural sounds with those of the supernatural, making it nearly impossible to distinguish one from the other. Even the lighthouse grounds bear witness to strange occurrences. Shadows flit among the cliffs, darting between rocks and trees along the path. Some hikers report hearing whispers carried by the wind, calling names or issuing warnings to leave. Others claim to see ghostly lanterns moving across the cliffs below, as if spirits are guiding or warning. There are accounts of cold spots so intense that visitors feel physically pushed or restrained, an invisible presence communicating through temperature and pressure rather than sound. The surrounding cliffs seem almost alive, echoing the misery and isolation that define the lighthouse's spectral history. Many who explore Cape Decision report a persistent feeling of being followed, not only in the lighthouse, but along the winding paths leading up to it. Steps that seem to echo behind the visitor often disappear before they reach a turn in the path. The wind carries whispers, indistinct but insistent, sometimes forming words in a language long forgotten. Lights appear briefly in windows that should be dark, only to vanish the moment someone looks directly at them. Some visitors have fled entirely, claiming that the spirits of keepers, shipwrecked sailors, and lost travelers are all present simultaneously, watching, guiding, and warning in ways that defy explanation. Cape Fairweather Lighthouse stands isolated against the relentless forces of the Gulf of Alaska, perched on jagged cliffs that rise sharply from storm-tossed waters. By day, the lighthouse appears as a solitary guardian, its bright white walls gleaming against gray skies, a symbol of safety for mariners navigating the treacherous Gulf. By night, however, the structure transforms into a place of eerie legend. Sailors and explorers alike have long whispered about the lighthouse's uncanny ability to attract the restless dead, and the many vanishings attributed to its surrounding cliffs and rocky shores. Witnesses report spectral lights flickering in the tower, ghostly figures climbing the spiral staircase, and the haunting echo of foghorns even when the horn has been silenced for decades. Some say the spirits of lost mariners remain tethered to the lighthouse, forever wandering the rocky coastline and searching for a safe passage that will never come. The approach to Cape Fairweather is itself unnerving. The jagged cliffs and narrow paths are slick with rain, ice, and salt spray from the Gulf below. Visitors often report feeling watched from the moment they set foot on the cliffs. An oppressive sensation that grows as the lighthouse rises into view. Hikers have described hearing footsteps echoing behind them, only for the sounds to vanish when they turn. Whispers carried by the wind are common, sometimes forming the faint words of a sailor calling for help or a keeper warning trespassers to leave. Others report the glimmer of lanterns from the tower windows, though the lighthouse has long been automated and unmanned. Inside, the lighthouse is steeped in an atmosphere of isolation and supernatural tension. The spiral staircase leading to the lantern room amplifies every sound, from the creak of a step to the faintest whisper. Cold drafts sweep through the hallways even when the doors are closed tightly, and visitors often report sudden drops in temperature as though unseen hands are brushing past them. Lights flicker inexplicably, and objects are occasionally found out of place, adding to the sense of disorientation. Some claim to have seen figures climbing the stairs, only for the apparitions to vanish when approached, leaving nothing but an echo of hurried footsteps and the smell of salt and old oil. The lighthouse has a tragic history that seems to fuel its paranormal reputation. Over the decades, numerous keepers have endured the isolation and harsh weather conditions, and many have perished under mysterious circumstances. Sailors attempting to seek refuge from storms often vanished on the cliffs, swept away by rogue waves or hidden currents. Witnesses claim that these lost souls return to the lighthouse, retracing their final steps in a restless, endless loop. The most chilling accounts describe seeing multiple figures simultaneously, keepers performing nightly duties, and sailors attempting to reach safety, all appearing frozen in a moment of time that never truly ends. The lantern room is a hot spot for ghostly activity. Visitors report seeing lights moving along the glass panes, shadows pacing the railing, and the sudden creak of the rotating lamp, as if someone is tending it. Some have described shadowy keepers in weathered uniforms, moving with precision, adjusting controls, and peering out into the gulf, vanishing when approached. Others have heard phantom foghorns echoing across the water, the mournful sound carrying for miles and chilling the bones of anyone nearby. Even those standing safely on the cliffs have reported hearing these sounds, as though the spirits are reaching beyond the lighthouse to communicate with the living. The rocky shores surrounding Cape Fairweather are just as haunted as the lighthouse itself. Visitors report seeing ghostly figures walking along the cliffs, their reflections shimmering in tide pools and wet rocks. Some claim the spirits attempt to warn them of unseen dangers, shifting shadows just out of reach or whispering their names on the wind. Cold spots and sudden gusts of wind are frequent, often accompanied by the sensation of being lightly touched, as if invisible hands are guiding or warning the living. The isolation of the location amplifies these experiences, leaving many explorers uneasy and compelled to leave before nightfall. Stormy nights intensify the paranormal presence. The cliffs are pounded by waves, and the wind whistles through the lighthouse, blending with the sounds of ghostly footsteps and whispers. Witnesses described seeing figures silhouetted against flashes of lightning, pacing on the deck or climbing the tower stairs while the storm rages around them. Doors slam shut with no wind to push them, and the foghorn, long decommissioned, can be heard booming across the cliffs and water. These events create a disorienting symphony of natural and supernatural forces, leaving visitors shaken and often fleeing before experiencing the full extent of the haunting. Many who visit Cape Fairweather report a persistent sensation of being followed, not only inside the lighthouse, but along the cliffs and rocky trails leading to it. Footsteps echo behind them, only to stop when they attempt to confront the source. Whispers carried on the wind call their names, sometimes urging them to leave, sometimes simply echoing the cries of those lost to the gulf. Lights appear and vanish from the tower windows, and shadowy figures can be glimpsed among rocks, cliffs, and tide pools, always just out of reach. For those who remain, the lighthouse becomes a nexus of grief, history, and the restless dead, where the line between the living and the spectral fades with each passing storm. Skaden Lighthouse stands as a solitary sentinel on the rocky shores of Resurrection Bay, its whitewashed walls contrasting sharply against the dark waters and jagged cliffs. Remote and exposed to the relentless Alaskan weather, the lighthouse has guided countless vessels through treacherous waters. Yet, beyond its practical function, Skaden is enveloped in whispers of the supernatural. Visitors and sailors alike speak of shadowy figures moving through the lantern room and keeper's quarters, ghostly footsteps echoing along the spiral staircase, and doors that open and close with no apparent cause. Many claim that the spirit of the first keeper, who tended the lighthouse long ago, still watches over the bay, maintaining his eternal vigil. The approach to Skaden Lighthouse is itself unnerving. The rocky coastline is jagged and slick, with waves crashing against the cliffs below. Fog frequently rolls in from Resurrection Bay, obscuring the lighthouse until it suddenly emerges through the mist. Visitors have reported feeling a sense of being watched even before reaching the tower. Some hikers describe hearing the echo of footsteps behind them on the narrow paths, only to turn and find no one there. The wind seems to carry whispers, sometimes faint, other times clear enough to resemble a voice calling for attention or warning intruders to leave. Shadows appear to flicker along the cliffs, giving the sense of movement just beyond sight. Inside, the lighthouse maintains a stark yet functional atmosphere, but it is far from peaceful. The spiral staircase that leads to the lantern room creaks and groans with every step, and visitors report hearing additional footsteps that do not match their own. Cold drafts sweep through the hallways, sometimes accompanied by the faint smell of salt, oil, or something reminiscent of old wood. Doors in the keeper's quarters have been known to open or slam shut without explanation, and lights occasionally flicker, even though the lighthouse is long automated. Some witnesses have claimed to see figures in period clothing moving quietly through the rooms, vanishing the moment someone approaches. The lantern room is often described as the epicenter of paranormal activity. Visitors report seeing shadows pacing along the railing or standing near the lamp, as if maintaining a careful watch over the bay. Some have seen the lamp's glass panes suddenly glint as though someone has polished them, only to find the space empty moments later. On stormy nights, the light seems to glow brighter than usual, piercing the fog in a way that some claim is more spectral than mechanical. The faint echo of footsteps climbing the spiral staircase accompanies the gusting wind, and many claim to feel a cold presence, as though someone unseen is observing their every move. The history of Skaden Lighthouse adds to its spectral reputation. Built in the early 20th century, it has witnessed countless storms, shipwrecks, and maritime tragedies. The first keeper, a solitary man devoted to guiding ships safely through Resurrection Bay, reportedly died on duty, though the circumstances remain vague and shrouded in local lore. It is said that his spirit never left, remaining to ensure that vessels navigating the treacherous waters do not meet the same fate as those lost decades ago. Visitors often describe a lingering sense of calm in the lantern room, as if the original keeper is silently ensuring their safety, while simultaneously warning them that the lighthouse is a place not to be taken lightly. The keeper's quarters, though small, have been the source of many unsettling experiences. Guests report hearing soft footsteps pacing the floorboards at night, whispers that cannot be traced to any living source, and shadows that move independently of the light. Some claim the shadows mimic human figures, appearing briefly in corners or standing by windows, only to vanish when approached. Objects have been observed shifting slightly, as though nudged by invisible hands, and some visitors report a feeling of being gently watched, a sensation that intensifies when the fog rolls in from the bay. Stormy nights bring the lighthouse's haunting qualities to the forefront. The wind roars through the cliffs and along the spiral staircase, blending with the sound of unseen footsteps and distant whispers. Visitors have described seeing the figure of a man in period clothing pacing the lantern room, while the fog outside seems to swirl in response to his presence. Doors open and close without explanation, and the faint sound of a bell or a foghorn, long decommissioned, can sometimes be heard echoing across the bay. The isolation and extreme weather amplify the feeling of vulnerability, leaving visitors with an acute awareness of the lighthouse's spectral occupants. Outside, along the rocky shores of Resurrection Bay, the presence of the lighthouse seems to extend into the surrounding environment. Cold drafts are felt along the paths, and the whisper of a distant voice carries on the wind. Point Sherman Lighthouse, perched on the rocky edge of Tungasa's Narrows, has long been a sentinel against the treacherous waters of southeastern Alaska. Its weathered walls and towering structure have guided countless ships safely through the Narrows. But the lighthouse is also known for the darker side of its history. Over the years, numerous shipwrecks have claimed the lives of sailors in the surrounding waters, and according to local lore, some of these souls never left. Visitors to Point Sherman frequently report unusual occurrences, ghostly footsteps echoing through empty halls, lights flickering at random, and shadowy figures glimpsed in the windows. For some, the experiences are so intense that they leave the lighthouse in terror, unable to stay a moment longer. One of the most commonly reported phenomena is the sound of ghostly footsteps. Explorers and lighthouse visitors often hear the distinct rhythm of someone walking along the tower's narrow staircases or pacing the observation decks, even when they are certain no one else is present. The footsteps sometimes ascend and descend stairs or circle rooms, disappearing abruptly as if the spirits vanish into the walls themselves. The echo of these phantom movements leaves an unsettling impression, suggesting that the souls of lost sailors or past lighthouse keepers continue to roam the halls, retracing familiar paths in an eternal cycle. Lights flickering at random is another hallmark of the lighthouse's eerie activity. Visitors have described lamps turning on and off without explanation, or the lantern at the top of the tower casting uneven, fleeting beams across the rocky coastline. These disruptions often occur without electrical or mechanical cause, creating a disorienting and unnerving atmosphere. Some explorers have noted that the flickering seems to correspond with other paranormal events, such as the sudden appearance of shadows or the sound of footsteps. The unpredictable illumination reinforces the sense that the lighthouse itself is alive with the energy of those who never left, and that unseen hands continue to manipulate its lights. Shadowy figures in the windows add another layer of fear for those who visit Point Sherman. Guests report seeing dark silhouettes moving behind panes of glass, appearing as though someone is watching from the inside, while no one is actually there. These figures are usually indistinct, lacking clear facial features or defining characteristics, which makes them both familiar and unsettling. Some visitors describe feeling a presence staring at them as they approach the lighthouse, while others witness the figures only from a distance, disappearing when observed directly. The combination of shadows, flickering lights, and ghostly footsteps creates an environment that is as psychologically chilling as it is visually unnerving. Perhaps the most chilling and heart-wrenching phenomenon is the sound of a child's cry echoing through the lighthouse. Some explorers recount hearing faint wails, often described as coming from the upper levels or the observation deck. Despite knowing that no children are present, the cries are usually fleeting but leave a lasting impression, evoking sorrow, fear, and a deep sense of empathy for whatever spirits might be trapped within the tower. Many who hear the child's cries report feeling an irresistible urge to leave immediately, unable to remain in a place where the pain of the past feels so present. Staff and frequent visitors to Point Sherman Lighthouse are well aware of its haunted reputation. Lighthouse keepers, both past and present, have shared accounts of footsteps, flickering lights, and shadowy figures appearing in unexpected locations. Some have described feeling a cold presence pass by, a sensation of being watched, or hearing sounds that cannot be explained by wind or wildlife. Explorers and paranormal enthusiasts who visit often recount similar experiences, reinforcing the impression that the lighthouse is a gathering place for restless spirits tied to the tragedies of the surrounding waters. Local legends suggest that the lingering spirits at Point Sherman are connected to the many shipwrecks that have occurred along the Tungasa's Narrows. Sailors lost to the currents, never reaching safety, are believed to return to the lighthouse, drawn to its light and the familiar structure that once guided them. Others speculate that past keepers, who spent long and isolated months maintaining the tower, may have left imprints of their presence that continue to replay for modern visitors. These tales, combined with repeated first-hand experiences, have cemented the lighthouse's reputation as a place where the living and the spectral intersect. Guests who visit Point Sherman Lighthouse often leave with lasting memories of their encounters. Many describe the ghostly footsteps echoing in empty halls, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows across the walls, and dark figures watching from the windows. Those who hear the cries of a child recount a profound emotional response, a mixture of fear, sorrow, and unease. Some explorers, unable to endure the intensity of these experiences, have fled before dawn, leaving the lighthouse behind, their footsteps mingling with those of the spirits they encountered. Whale Island Lighthouse stands alone against the endless expanse of Sitka Sound, a solitary sentinel, battered by wind and sea. The island, little more than a jagged outcrop of rock and moss, has long been a point of fascination for both mariners and ghost hunters. Built to warn ships away from the treacherous waters that claimed countless lives, the lighthouse has since earned a different kind of reputation. A reputation for being alive, haunted not just by spirits, but by something deeper and older that seems to dwell within the very stones of the tower. Approaching Whale Island is no simple task. The waves crash violently against the rocks, and the fog that settles over Sitka Sound can turn even the shortest journey into a disorienting nightmare. Locals speak of the island with a mix of respect and fear. Fishermen tell stories of strange lights glimmering near the cliffs at night, of phantom lanterns swaying where no keeper stands. Some claim to hear voices over the roar of the surf, distant, mournful cries that drift from the direction of the island, calling names no one recognizes. The lighthouse has been automated for decades, yet those who pass near it at night insist the beam still moves, as though guided by an unseen hand. Visitors who have managed to step foot on Whale Island describe an atmosphere that feels immediately oppressive. The air carries a strange heaviness, as if the island itself is aware of the intrusion. Even in daylight, the sea mist clings thick to the air, muting color and sound. The lighthouse rises from the rock like a ghost itself, its once white walls weathered gray, its iron railings rusted and worn. The front door often groans open as though waiting, and more than one explorer has said the wind seems to whisper words as they cross the threshold. Inside, the air grows colder, and the silence is broken only by the distant moan of waves and the creak of unseen pressure shifting within the walls. The stories of hauntings here date back to the early 1900s, when a keeper and his family vanished without explanation. The relief crew found the door locked from the inside, the lamp still burning, and supper half-eaten on the table. Of the family, there was no trace. Since then, reports of supernatural occurrences have persisted. Spectral figures are said to appear on the decks during storms, translucent men in old keeper uniforms, pacing slowly, their faces hidden by shadow. Some witnesses have seen figures climb the tower stairs, lantern in hand, only for the light to fade before reaching the top. Others have looked up from boats below to see silhouettes moving in the lantern room, even though the structure has been unoccupied for years. Inside, those brave enough to explore the lighthouse have described the sensation of being watched from every corner. The walls seem to breathe, expanding and contracting in rhythm with the wind outside. Footsteps echo from the stairwell when no one is there, and the smell of burning oil sometimes fills the air. On occasion, the beam of light has turned without mechanical power, sweeping slowly across the dark water as if searching for something or someone. Some explorers claim the light followed them as they moved, tracking their every step with eerie precision. When they tried to leave, doors slammed shut behind them, trapping them until the wind shifted and the building seemed to release them on its own. One of the most chilling legends tied to Whale Island tells of a sailor who washed ashore after a shipwreck decades ago. According to old accounts, he was found alive by the keeper, but delirious, rambling about ghostly hands, dragging his crewmates beneath the waves. The sailor died that same night, and from that point on, strange phenomena seemed to intensify. The keeper's log recorded unexplained noises, phantom lights, and the sound of knocking at the door in the middle of the night. 3 knocks, followed by silence. After the keeper's disappearance, the logbook was found open on the desk. The final entry reading only, "It's inside." Over the years, Researchers and paranormal investigators have attempted to document the hauntings of Whale Island. Electronic devices fail frequently, their batteries drained in moments. Audio recorders capture faint whispers, sometimes repeating the names of the visitors themselves. Cold spots move unpredictably through the tower, and some investigators claim to have felt a pulse in the floorboards, like the heartbeat of a living being. Even skeptics have left the island unsettled, describing sensations they could not explain: the feeling of unseen fingers brushing against their necks, or the faint sound of breathing behind them in otherwise empty rooms. At night, the haunting presence becomes almost unbearable. The wind carries the sound of distant cries, rising and falling with the rhythm of the waves. Shadows move against the lantern glass, though there is no light inside to cast them. The metallic clang of chains echoes from the catwalk, sometimes followed by the heavy sound of footsteps circling the tower. Those who dared to stay until midnight report hearing the foghorn blare from nowhere. The station hasn't had a functioning horn in decades. Moments later, a whispering chorus fills the air, faint yet unmistakable, as if dozens of unseen voices are speaking all at once, overlapping in desperate murmurs. Locals believe the spirits of lost sailors and keepers are bound to the lighthouse, forever repeating the routines of their final moments. But some go further, claiming the lighthouse itself has absorbed their energy, that it has become sentient, a living monument built from tragedy and solitude. Visitors have said that when they speak aloud, the building responds, creaks aligning with words, wind gusts answering questions, and lights flickering in apparent acknowledgement. When they attempt to leave too soon, the fog thickens unnaturally, the air turning so dense it feels almost physical, as though the island refuses to let them go. Cape Almany Lighthouse stands on the rugged edge of Prince William Sound, a lonely sentinel against the crashing waves and endless fog. Built in the early 1900s to guide ships through treacherous waters, the lighthouse became both a refuge and a prison for the men who once kept its light burning. Over the decades, it has witnessed fierce storms, fatal accidents, and long winters of isolation. Today, it stands automated and empty, yet visitors say it is far from silent. Fishermen, explorers, and even Coast Guard personnel have told similar tales. Footsteps echoing across the metal walkways when no one else is present, the beam of light cutting through the fog even when the power is disconnected, and faint voices carried on the wind. Some claim that the spirits of the original keepers never left, doomed to repeat their nightly routines, tending a light that no longer burns. Cape Almany's history is steeped in hardship. The remote location, perched on a cliff that vanishes into mist half the year, made life there nearly unbearable. Supplies were delivered by boat once a month, sometimes less during storms, and communication with the mainland was nearly impossible. The keepers lived with the constant sound of howling wind and crashing surf, surrounded by darkness and fog. Some reportedly went mad from the isolation. Others simply vanished without explanation. The first keeper, a man named Edward Hanlon, took his post in 1907. Records describe him as a meticulous worker who never missed a nightly lighting. But in November of that same year, after a brutal storm struck the Sound, Hanlon disappeared. The supply boat found the lighthouse still operational, the lens clean, the lamp burning, but there was no sign of the keeper. His logbook ended mid-sentence with the words, "The sea is rising again," written in uneven ink. Search parties found only a single boot lodged between rocks near the shoreline. Since then, strange phenomena have surrounded the lighthouse. When the fog rolls in thick across the Sound, travelers have reported seeing a figure moving in the lantern room, silhouetted against a faint glow of light. Others claim to hear the sound of chains clanking and the rhythmic thud of boots on the catwalk, always steady, always circling. The sounds echo through the mist, even when the structure is completely deserted. One of the most chilling accounts came from a group of Coast Guard engineers sent to inspect the tower in the 1950s. According to their report, as they approached the island by boat, they saw the lantern illuminated, though power had not yet been connected. Upon entering, they found the rooms undisturbed, as if someone had recently been living there, tools neatly arranged, the logbook open on the table, and a mug of cold coffee beside it. But there were no footprints, no sign of anyone inside. That night, As they camped on shore, one of the men awoke to the sound of heavy footsteps pacing outside their tent. When they looked toward the lighthouse, the lantern was glowing faintly once more. Over time, these stories grew into legend. Locals began referring to the ghostly presence as the Watcher of Amani. Some say it's Hanlon, forever trapped in his duty. Others believe it's a collection of spirits from sailors lost to the surrounding waters. The sound has swallowed countless ships over the years, their wrecks scattered along the seafloor. Fishermen often report seeing faint lights flickering just beneath the surface, as if lanterns were being carried by hands that no longer breathe. Visitors brave enough to approach the lighthouse describe an unsettling atmosphere that seems to thicken with each step. The air grows colder, the fog denser, and the sound of the sea fades into an eerie silence. Many say they feel watched before they even reach the door. Inside, the structure creaks and groans like a living thing. Doors open and close slowly on their own, the hinges moaning under an invisible weight. In the keeper's quarters, beds are sometimes found neatly made, despite being untouched for years. The air carries a faint scent of oil and salt, as though the lamps were freshly cleaned. Paranormal investigators who have studied Cape Amani claim that the hauntings are tied to the strong residual energy of those who once worked there. They speak of repetitive sounds, footsteps, the sound of a door latch, the faint turning of gears that seem to replay the routines of the long-dead crew. During one investigation, an EMF meter reportedly spiked each time the investigators mentioned the name Hanlon. Another captured a low voice on audio, repeating the word light. Even modern mariners speak of the strange glow that occasionally pierces the fog where the lighthouse stands. They describe a narrow beam sweeping across the water, slow and deliberate, just as it did when the station was manned. Yet the light has been decommissioned for decades, its mechanisms long disabled. Some say it's an atmospheric trick, others are not so sure. A few adventurers have stayed overnight, hoping to witness the haunting for themselves. One man described being awakened by the sound of footsteps ascending the metal staircase outside his room. The steps stopped directly outside his door, followed by a faint tapping sound, 3 knocks, evenly spaced. When he opened the door, the hallway was empty. Later that night, he saw the faint outline of a man in an old-style keeper's uniform standing at the base of the tower, looking out to sea. When lightning flashed, the figure was gone. Locals who live along Prince William Sound warn that the lighthouse should be left alone. They say the fog there is unlike anywhere else. It moves with intention, curling around visitors as if to herd them back toward their boats. Some claim the spirits are not malicious, merely trapped in duty, unable to leave the station they once served. Others believe something darker holds them there, bound to the endless rhythm of waves and storms. Cape Muzon Lighthouse, standing on the rugged edge of Dixon Entrance, where Alaska meets the open Pacific, is one of the most remote and storm-battered lighthouses in the state. Built to guide ships through treacherous waters filled with rocks, fog, and shifting tides, it has also gained an unsettling reputation, not just for its isolation, but for the spirits said to inhabit its tower and surrounding cliffs. For over a century, locals and mariners have whispered about the ghosts that linger there, bound to the light that once saved countless lives, and perhaps claimed just as many. On calm days, the lighthouse appears serene, a white beacon perched against the gray expanse of sea and sky. But when the fog rolls in from the Pacific, the place transforms. The air grows heavy with salt and moisture, and visibility drops to almost nothing. That's when the strange sounds begin, the slow, rhythmic thud of footsteps climbing the spiral staircase. Even though the lighthouse has been automated and uninhabited for decades, keepers once stationed here reported hearing doors creak open in the night, only to find every latch bolted and every corridor empty. Some claimed they could hear low whispers drifting up from the lantern room, calling their names in voices that didn't belong to any living man. Sailors navigating near Cape Muzon often speak of spectral lights that appear where no beacon should be, faint, floating orbs that glide through the fog, then vanish without a trace. These lights, said to shimmer like lanterns carried by unseen hands, have been blamed for disorienting captains and sending vessels dangerously close to the rocks. Old fishing crews tell of seeing human shapes outlined against the beam, shadowy figures walking the perimeter of the lantern gallery as if performing routine inspections. Yet the lighthouse has been fully automated since the 1960s, and no crew has lived there since. Local legends trace the hauntings back to a storm in the early 1900s, when a supply ship carrying fuel and food for the keepers crashed against a nearby reef. Several crewmen drowned before rescuers could arrive, and their bodies were never recovered. 4 weeks after, the surviving keepers claimed to hear the sounds of banging on the exterior doors during heavy weather, as if the lost men were still trying to come ashore. One journal entry from 1909 records that the main keeper awoke to find wet footprints leading from the base of the stairs to the tower, though the doors had been locked from the inside all night. Over the decades, reports from passing ships and visiting Coast Guard personnel continued to feed the legend. In 1934, a patrol crew spending the night inside the lighthouse described lights turning on in rooms that had no power and hearing the unmistakable scrape of a chair being dragged across the floor upstairs. When they investigated, they found the chair lying on its side and a cold draft filling the room despite the windows being sealed shut. A few of them refused to stay past nightfall again. Fishermen and residents from nearby Prince of Wales Island have long believed Cape Muson is not just haunted. They claim it as a portal, a thin place where the veil between worlds wears dangerously thin. Some say the fog around the cape carries voices from beyond, trapped echoes of those who perished at sea. They speak of phantom bells and disembodied cries heard just before storms. According to one tale, a local fisherman once sought shelter near the lighthouse during a fierce squall. As he anchored his boat, he saw a figure waving from the tower's balcony, urging him to come closer. When he looked again, the figure had vanished, and the lighthouse stood dark and empty. The next morning, his boat was found adrift, its engine still running, but he was gone, never seen again. The stories continued even into modern times. In the 1980s, a Coast Guard maintenance team visited to inspect the automated systems. One technician later reported hearing the sound of boots echoing on the metal stairs behind him, followed by a faint humming, an old sea shanty, sung in a low, distant voice. Thinking it was one of his crewmates, he called out, but no one answered. When he turned around, the stairwell was empty, and the humming had stopped. The team left before nightfall, leaving their work incomplete. Photographers who visit today describe an eerie sensation of being watched. Equipment sometimes fails inexplicably. Batteries drain, lenses fog, and faint outlines appear in photos. Translucent figures near the tower's base or along the railings. Some claim to see what looks like a man in oilskins, carrying a lantern, walking slowly along the cliffs before fading into the mist. Others report hearing the clang of the old fog bell, though it was removed years ago. The atmosphere around Cape Muson is undeniably haunting. The wind whistles through cracks in the stone, and the waves crash violently against the rocks below. When the fog envelops the tower, it seems to muffle all natural sound until the faint murmur of unseen footsteps or the distant echo of voices breaks the silence. Locals say it's the crew of the lost supply ship, still patrolling the shoreline. Others believe the spirits of generations of keepers remain carrying out their duties in the afterlife, lighting the way for those still at sea. Cape St. James Lighthouse stands on the lonely edge of Clarence Strait, where the wind meets the cold, unrelenting sea. For over a century, it has endured storms, shipwrecks, and isolation, but it has also become known as one of Alaska's most haunted beacons. Those who've dared to visit the desolate cape speak of ghostly footsteps echoing along the stairwells, spectral keepers pacing the decks, and the sound of distant cries carried from the cliffs. The haunting of Cape St. James is not merely a tale of tragedy. It's a chilling reminder that duty and devotion sometimes reach beyond death itself. The lighthouse, first illuminated in the early 1900s, was built to guide mariners through the perilous waters of Clarence Strait, a narrow and unpredictable passage often shrouded in thick fog and battered by sudden gales. The men who served there endured months of solitude, cut off from the mainland by treacherous seas. Many keepers described the sound of the waves slamming into the rocks as a constant roar, a relentless reminder of nature's power and indifference. Yet for some, the greatest danger wasn't the sea, it was the isolation itself. According to local lore, the first tragedy struck only a few years after the lighthouse was completed. A supply boat bringing provisions from Ketchikan was caught in a storm just off the Cape. The small vessel capsized within sight of the keepers, who could do nothing but watch helplessly as the men were dragged beneath the icy waves. Their cries, it said, echoed off the cliffs for hours. Ever since, mariners claimed that, on fog-heavy nights, the same anguished shouts can still be heard, rising and fading with the wind. The first documented haunting came decades later, when a new keeper reported hearing someone walking the gallery deck outside the lantern room in the middle of the night. Believing one of his assistants had gone out to inspect the light, he followed only to find the deck empty, the door locked from the inside, and the sea eerily calm. That same night, he recorded in his log that the lantern began to sway violently, though there was no wind strong enough to move it. Other keepers soon reported similar experiences, footsteps following them up the spiral staircase, the sound of heavy boots on the catwalk, and the sensation of being watched as they worked. Tools went missing, only to be found neatly arranged in the lantern room. One assistant claimed he awoke to the sight of a man standing by his bunk, wearing an old-style keeper-esque coat and hat, who vanished when the light beam passed through him. After that, the man refused to sleep in the quarters again. By the mid-20th century, the lighthouse had gained a grim reputation among Coast Guard personnel. Some crews avoided overnight stays altogether, preferring to complete maintenance during daylight hours. One team in the 1950s recounted that, during a calm evening, the lantern suddenly began to swing so forcefully that the entire room shook. They fled the tower, fearing an earthquake, but outside the air was still and silent. When they returned minutes later, everything had stopped. The lens stood perfectly still, as though nothing had happened. Locals have their own explanations for the haunting. Some say the spirits are those of drowned sailors, forever circling the Cape where their lives ended. Others insist that one of the original keepers, a man named Walter N., still patrols the tower. N. was said to be a perfectionist, dedicated to maintaining the light no matter the conditions. When he vanished during a storm in 1923, his logbook was found open on his desk. The last entry reading only, "Light must not go out." His body was never recovered. Since then, visitors claim to see a shadowy figure matching his description, tall and carrying a lantern, walking the perimeter of the tower, as if checking that everything remains in order. One chilling account came from a group of explorers who visited the abandoned station after it was automated. As they ascended the spiral stairs, they heard the unmistakable rhythm of boots following behind them, slow, deliberate, and heavy. Thinking one of their friends was playing a trick, they called out, but no one answered. When they reached the lantern room, the old glass enclosure began to rattle violently, even though the sea below was calm and the air inside was still. Terrified, they ran for the door, but it slammed shut before they could reach it. When it finally gave way, they fled down the stairs and out into the open, only to look back and see the lantern swaying again, as if being pushed by unseen hands. Even seasoned fishermen keep their distance from Cape St. James after dark. Many have reported seeing a dim light moving along the cliffs, too far from the tower to be part of its beam. Some describe it as a lantern bobbing back and forth, others as a figure pacing the edge, staring out to sea. When approached, the light disappears. One fisherman, interviewed years later, said he once anchored nearby during a storm and saw a man standing on the balcony of the lighthouse, watching him. But when morning came and he went ashore, the structure was empty, not a single footprint in the wet gravel leading to the door. The lighthouse's automation in the late 20th century didn't end the stories. Maintenance workers still report odd occurrences, tools vanishing from locked cabinets, radios crackling with faint voices, and doors swinging open in calm weather. One crew even claimed that the foghorn began to sound by itself one night, though it had been deactivated for years. They left before dawn and refused to return. There's something timeless about the hauntings at Cape St. James. Whether the spirits belong to lost sailors, devoted keepers, or restless echoes of tragedy, their presence seems woven into the rhythm of the place itself. The constant whisper of the wind, the groan of the tower under pressure, the endless crash of the waves, all of it creates the illusion that the lighthouse is alive, breathing, and remembering. Cape Newenham Lighthouse stands on the windswept edge of Alaska's Bering Sea coast, a lonely sentinel surrounded by endless waves and fog. Few places feel more remote, more isolated, or more haunted by the past. For over a century, it has guided mariners through freezing storms and treacherous tides. Yet those who approach the tower at night say the light does not belong solely to the living. There are whispers in the wind, footsteps echoing through the halls, and doors that move as though opened by unseen hands. Many believe that the keepers who once tended the lamp never truly left. Built in the early 1900s, Cape Newenham Lighthouse was meant to be a beacon of safety in one of Alaska's most unforgiving regions. The cliffs surrounding the station plunge sharply into black, churning waters, and the weather can shift from calm to deadly in minutes. Supply ships came only a few times each year, and the men stationed there often endured months of solitude with little more than their duties and the howling wind for company. To them, the sea was both a guardian and a threat, a vast, restless expanse that demanded constant vigilance. According to records, the first keeper, Thomas Hale, arrived in 1909 and immediately faced tragedy. Within weeks of his arrival, a storm tore through the region, sinking a small fishing vessel just offshore. Hale and his crew could do nothing but watch as the ship's lantern vanished beneath the waves. When the storm cleared, no bodies were found, only wreckage scattered along the rocky coast. Hale noted in his journal that on the following nights, he saw a strange light hovering on the horizon, as if the lost vessel's lantern still drifted above the water. That would not be the last spectral light reported near Cape Newenham. Over the decades, mariners have spoken of glowing orbs gliding across the sea, appearing and vanishing without warning. Some describe them as faint blue lanterns, others as white flames that dance just above the surface before plunging into the waves. Fishermen refuse to sail too close, claiming the lights belong to the spirits of those claimed by the Bering Sea. One man even swore that his compass spun wildly when the lights appeared, and his radio filled with static, laced with faint whispers. Inside the lighthouse, the hauntings are even more personal. Visitors and maintenance crews who have stayed overnight report the sound of boots climbing the spiral stairs, slow and deliberate, stopping just outside the lantern room. When checked, no one is ever there. Doors open and close in calm weather, heavy iron latches clicking on their own. Lights flicker though the electrical systems are disconnected. One caretaker in the 1970s wrote that he awoke in the middle of the night to find the lantern burning brightly, even though he had removed the bulb earlier that evening. Locals tell of a keeper who went mad from isolation in the 1920s. His name, rarely spoken, is said to still echo in the halls. The legend claims that after years of storms and solitude, he began hearing voices in the fog, men calling for help, women crying out from the sea. When rescue teams arrived months later, they found the lighthouse in perfect working order. The logbook's final entry reads simply, "The light must stay lit. They need it." The keeper was never found. One of the most chilling stories came from a Coast Guard crew that visited in the early 1980s. To perform maintenance after the station had been automated, the three men spent the night inside the old quarters, sleeping in shifts. Around midnight, one of them was awakened by the sound of the tower door creaking open. Thinking a storm had caught it, he went to secure it, only to see a shadow move up the stairs ahead of him, carrying what looked like a lantern. He called out, but there was no answer. The light continued upward until it disappeared near the top of the tower. When he reached the lantern room, the air was bitterly cold, and the door was locked from the inside. All three men left before sunrise and refused to return. They later described hearing faint humming through the radio, a tune that matched an old sailor's song, documented in the archives of the first keepers. Even now, years after automation, strange phenomena persist. Modern visitors report hearing the rhythmic clang of the metal catwalk in calm weather, as though someone were pacing in time with the sea. On foggy nights, A dim glow sometimes appears in the tower windows, despite the power long being cut off. Hikers who approach from the cliffs have seen what they describe as a figure standing in the lantern room, tall, motionless, wearing an old keeper's coat, vanishing when the fog thickens. One photographer, who ventured to Cape Newham to capture the aurora, claimed that as he focused his camera on the lighthouse, the beam of his flashlight dimmed. He looked up to see a faint figure walking the perimeter of the structure, its lantern swinging in rhythm with the wind. The next morning, his equipment was coated in a fine layer of salt, though the air had been still all night. When he developed the photos, several showed what looked like a second beam of light glowing from within the tower, far too bright to be a reflection. Locals near the coast often speak of the Keeper's Covenant, the belief that those who served at the lighthouse are bound to it, even after death. They say the spirits remain out of duty, not malice. When storms roll across the sea, the light sometimes flickers to life for just a few seconds, as if a hand unseen has tended the lamp one final time. Some fishermen take comfort in that, believing the ghosts are still watching over them, guiding them through danger. Others find it deeply unsettling, a sign that the souls of the lost can never rest. The official reports make no mention of hauntings, of course. They speak only of weather damage, aging infrastructure, and the relentless wear of salt and wind. But those who have walked the halls of Cape Newham Lighthouse know there is more to the story. They have felt the sudden chill, heard the echo of unseen boots, and seen the glow that shouldn't exist. Cape Sarikef Lighthouse stands on the unforgiving coast of Unimak Island, the westernmost reach of the Aleutian chain, where the Pacific Ocean and the Bering Sea collide in an eternal storm. Few places in the world are as remote or as eerie. The wind never ceases, the waves crash endlessly against black volcanic rock, and a heavy mist often hangs over the land like a living shroud. The lighthouse, perched on a rugged cliff, has long been a symbol of survival for sailors who brave these deadly waters. Yet those who have entered its doors speak of more than just storms. They tell of whispers in the wind, phantom lights, and spirits that seem to move with the sea itself. Built in 1904, Cape Sarikef Lighthouse was meant to be a guardian of the treacherous Unimak Pass, a vital but perilous route for ships navigating between the Pacific and the Bering Sea. It was one of the most isolated postings in the world. Keepers stationed there lived in near-total solitude, cut off from civilization by violent weather and dangerous currents. Many would go months without contact, their only company being the crash of waves, the howl of wind, and the steady pulse of the rotating light above. From the beginning, the lighthouse's history was marked by tragedy. The first recorded death occurred within a year of its opening, when an assistant keeper was swept into the sea during a supply offload. His body was never found. The keepers who remained swore they saw his shadow moving along the cliffs at night, pacing as if searching for a way home. Soon after, others began reporting strange occurrences, the sound of boots on the metal stairs, lanterns flickering though the air was still, and distant voices carried through the fog. As the decades passed, the hauntings became part of Cape Sarikef's legend. One of the most enduring tales tells of the Great Storm of 1918. When a cargo ship struck the rocks below the lighthouse, the keepers watched helplessly as the vessel broke apart in the surf, unable to launch a rescue boat in the gale. All hands were lost. In the nights that followed, keepers claimed they could hear cries rising from the water, and on certain nights, faint lights appeared on the waves, blue and white glows that drifted toward the shore before vanishing in silence. To this day, fishermen report seeing these phantom lights near the cape, especially during storms. Inside the lighthouse, reports of supernatural activity continued long after automation replaced human keepers. Maintenance crews who visited the abandoned quarters described doors slamming shut with violent force, tools vanishing and reappearing, and footsteps echoing through the hallways when no one else was inside. One worker swore he saw a figure standing in the lantern room, wearing an old-fashioned keeper's coat. When he climbed the stairs to investigate, the figure disappeared, leaving only the faint smell of salt and kerosene. Perhaps the most disturbing account came from a Coast Guard technician who spent the night there in the 1970s while repairing a radio system. He wrote in his report that the generator failed around midnight, leaving the lighthouse in total darkness. As he tried to restart it, he heard a deep, rhythmic knocking, like someone rapping on the outer wall. When he stepped outside, the air was eerily calm. But as he turned back toward the door, it slammed shut behind him. Through the glass, he saw a dim light glowing from the stairwell, a lantern swinging back and forth as if carried by unseen hands. He left the island the next morning and refused to return. Locals believe the spirits of drowned sailors still linger near Cape Sirikef, tied to the waters that claimed them. The treacherous tides of the pass have swallowed hundreds of ships over the years, their wrecks scattered across the seabed like bones. Divers who explore the area often report hearing strange underwater sounds, muffled voices, or distant knocking that seems to come from the wrecks themselves. Some refuse to dive there altogether, calling the waters alive and warning that those who venture too deep might not surface again. The lighthouse's reputation for paranormal activity has also drawn the attention of researchers and paranormal investigators. One expedition in the early 2000s recorded unexplained temperature drops in the keeper's quarters, sudden electromagnetic spikes, and disembodied voices captured on audio recorders. In one recording, a faint whisper seemed to say, "Keep the light burning." Another simply murmured, "Don't leave." Even modern sailors navigating the region speak of eerie experiences. On foggy nights, some report seeing the lighthouse beam flicker, though it has long been decommissioned. Others claim their radios pick up faint Morse code signals that match no known transmissions, brief, urgent bursts that seem to repeat the word help. When checked, there are no nearby vessels. The signals vanish as quickly as they appear. Many who live near the Aleutian chain believe that the storms themselves are connected to the spirits that haunt Cape Sirikef. They say the wind carries voices, the laments of lost sailors and keepers who never escaped their post. During the fiercest tempests, the ocean appears to glow faintly near the rocks, as if the souls of the drowned rise from the depths. In those moments, even the locals stay indoors, warning that the sea is reclaiming what it once lost. The physical isolation of the lighthouse only deepens its mystique. Reaching Cape Sirikef today requires a dangerous journey by boat or helicopter, and few dare to stay overnight. Those who do often report the same sensations: the sound of footsteps echoing in empty halls, the slow creak of the metal stairwell, and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. Some describe hearing faint weeping at dawn, carried on the wind from the sea below. One explorer who documented the site described a haunting final encounter. While photographing the lantern room, he noticed a faint silhouette reflected in the glass behind him, a tall figure wearing a keeper's cap. Thinking it was a trick of the light, he turned to look, but the room was empty. When he checked his camera later, the reflection was still there. In every frame, the figure stood motionless, staring out toward the ocean. Cape Sirikef Lighthouse remains a place where the line between the living and the dead seems to blur. The storms, the sea, and the spirits all move in harmony, bound by an unending duty to watch over those treacherous waters. Whether the ghosts are keepers still performing their nightly rounds, or the lost mariners seeking the safety they never found, no one can say. But the light, sometimes seen flickering faintly through the fog even after all power has been cut, stands as proof that something still endures there. Cape Lisborne Lighthouse stands at the edge of the world, overlooking the gray, icy waters of the Chukchi Sea. Its tower, battered by relentless Arctic winds, is one of the northernmost lighthouses in the United States. Here, storms roll in without warning, and the sea roars with a voice that seems alive. The air is cold and sharp even in summer, and in winter, the world becomes an endless sheet of white and silence. Yet, amid this desolation, there are whisper stories of shadowy figures, phantom footsteps, and flickering lanterns that appear in the night. Some say the souls of lost mariners and keepers still linger on the frozen cliffs, trapped by the very light that once guided them home. Built in 1907, Cape Lisborne Lighthouse was meant to protect ships navigating the perilous Arctic waters between Alaska and Russia. The site was chosen for its elevation and proximity to vital trade routes, but its isolation made it one of the harshest postings in the world. Supplies arrived only a few times a year, and for months, the keepers were left alone, with nothing but the wind. the sea, and the flickering beam of the light that pierced the darkness. Even in its earliest years, strange tales surrounded the lighthouse. The first crew stationed there reported hearing footsteps echoing along the metal catwalk at night, even when all were accounted for. They blamed the wind at first, until one of the men saw a shadowy figure moving near the base of the tower. When he went to investigate, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving only a faint impression in the snow. A few days later, his logbook entry ended abruptly, mid-sentence. The man was found dead the next morning, his body frozen near the lantern room door. No one could explain how he had ended up there in the middle of the night. Locals from nearby villages speak of the wandering lights of Lisbon, flickers of lanterns that move along the cliffs long after the sun disappears below the horizon. Hunters have seen these lights weaving through the fog, appearing and vanishing with the rhythm of the waves. They believe the lights belong to the spirits of sailors whose ships were wrecked on the reefs below. The waters near Cape Lisbon are treacherous, filled with jagged rocks hidden beneath the surface. Many vessels have met their end there, crushed and swallowed by the Arctic Sea. In 1923, one of the worst shipwrecks in the region's history occurred just offshore. A cargo vessel carrying supplies and crew struck a submerged rock and went down in the middle of a violent snowstorm. Only fragments of the ship washed ashore, crates, torn fabric, and pieces of the hull. The bodies of the crew were never recovered. In the weeks that followed, the lighthouse keepers reported strange happenings. Knocks on the door during blizzards, voices calling from the darkness, and the unmistakable sound of boots crunching in the snow outside. When they ventured out to look, there was nothing but wind and drifting ice. One keeper, a man named Henry Foster, wrote detailed accounts of the hauntings in his log. He described waking to the sound of footsteps climbing the spiral staircase, slow and deliberate, as if someone were making rounds through the tower. When he went to check, he found the door to the lantern room open, though it had been locked the night before. The next morning, he found wet footprints leading from the base of the tower to the shoreline prints that ended abruptly at the water's edge. Foster's final log entry was dated December 11, 1923. It read simply, "The light burns, but something else is here." He was never seen again. When the next supply crew arrived, months later, they found the lighthouse empty. The light was still operating, the generator humming steadily, but there was no sign of Foster. The only thing left was his journal, frozen solid on the desk. Over the decades, others stationed at Cape Lisbon added their own experiences to the legend. Some claimed to hear faint voices in the fog, low, mournful calls that seemed to drift up from the sea. Others saw shapes moving through the snow, pale and indistinct, like human figures made of mist. Tools disappeared, doors slammed on their own, and the light would flicker as though unseen hands passed in front of it. One keeper swore he saw a man standing on the observation deck one night, staring out toward the horizon. When he approached, the figure dissolved into a cloud of frost. By the 1970s, the lighthouse was automated, and human presence became rare. But even after the last crew departed, the strange activity didn't stop. Coast Guard technicians performing maintenance reported the same phenomena. Phantom footsteps echoing through empty halls, lights switching on by themselves, and the sound of a man humming softly from somewhere within the tower. Some workers refused to stay the night, choosing instead to sleep in their boats offshore. Local Inupiat stories add another layer to the mystery. They tell of a spirit that guards the cliffs, a ghostly sailor who perished in the ice long before the lighthouse was built. It's said he wanders the shoreline, searching for his lost crew. The elders warn that those who hear him calling from the fog should never answer, for his spirit seeks company among the living. Many believe that his restless presence fused with the lighthouse itself, giving rise to the hauntings that persist to this day. Modern visitors to Cape Lisbon, though few and far between, continue to report eerie encounters. Photographers camping near the site have captured unexplained lights moving through the mist, and drone operators claim their equipment malfunctions whenever they fly close to the tower. In one particularly chilling account, a researcher described feeling a hand on his shoulder as he climbed the stairs, though he was alone. When he turned, He saw a faint outline of a man in an old keeper S-coat standing in the doorway, and then nothing. Even now, ships passing through the Chukchi Sea sometimes report strange sightings near the Cape. Mariners have seen the light flash unexpectedly during storms, even when it was officially inactive. Some claim to spot a lone figure standing on the balcony, lantern in hand, gazing out over the endless expanse of gray water. On the western edge of Unimak Island, where the winds never rest and the sea crashes endlessly against black volcanic cliffs, the Cape Sarikef keepers' quarters sit in silence, or so it seems. The old structures, long abandoned and beaten by the Aleutian storms, stand beside the famed lighthouse that once guarded mariners through the perilous Bering Sea fog. Yet it is not the light that draws those curious enough to visit. It is the quarters themselves, the faded buildings where generations of keepers once lived, worked, and, some say, never truly left. The Cape Sarikef Lighthouse was built in 1904, one of the first on the Aleutian chain, meant to protect ships navigating through the fog-bound waters of Unimak Pass. For decades, the lighthouse served as a lonely sentinel in a world of constant wind and shifting light. The keepers who lived there endured isolation that would test even the strongest minds. The nearest settlement was over 100 miles away, and for much of the year, the sea ice and weather made travel impossible. When the storms rolled in, they could last for days, shaking the walls and howling through every gap and seam. In those days, the quarters were a modest complex, a main building for sleeping and eating, a small workshop, and a cold storage shed. The men who lived there were bound by duty to keep the light burning, no matter the conditions. But that dedication came at a cost. Logs from the early years described tension, paranoia, and inexplicable events that slowly wore away at the minds of the keepers. One entry from 1911, written by a keeper named James McBride, reads, "The sea speaks to us now. At night, I hear the door open when the latch is fast. I hear boots across the floor. We take turns checking, but there is no one there." His partner at the time, a man named Larson, reportedly began talking to someone who wasn't there, often standing at the window and whispering to the fog. McBride's final entry is short, written in a trembling hand. "Larson is gone. The sea called him. His body was later found washed up on the rocks below, and his death was ruled accidental, though some suspected otherwise." Decades passed, and the tales only grew darker. Visitors and relief crews spoke of a strange heaviness in the quarters, as if the air itself carried the weight of those who once lived there. Doors would open and close on their own, and the old floorboards creaked under invisible footsteps. One keeper reported hearing muffled conversations in the night, voices too faint to understand, yet distinct enough to make him believe he wasn't alone. By the 1940s, during the height of World War II, Cape Sarikef became a vital outpost for monitoring maritime movement. Military personnel stationed there wrote letters describing eerie experiences. One soldier mentioned hearing a constant knocking from the second floor, though no one was ever found there. Another claimed to see the silhouette of a man in a keeper S-coat pacing the yard at night, lantern in hand. When he ran outside to investigate, the figure vanished, leaving only footprints in the snow that ended abruptly halfway across the grounds. After the war, the quarters were gradually abandoned as automation took over. The remaining staff were moved out by the late 1950s, leaving behind their furniture, personal belongings, and a haunting stillness. Yet when explorers and Coast Guard crews began visiting the site in later years, they found signs that the quarters were not entirely empty. Visitors have described hearing the unmistakable sound of doors opening and closing when no wind was blowing, as if someone were walking from room to room. Some have heard whispering voices drifting through the corridors, always too faint to make out words, but distinct enough to raise the hairs on the back of the neck. Tools left neatly arranged in the morning would be found scattered by evening. A Coast Guard technician once reported hearing the clanging of a metal cup in the kitchen. When he went to check, he found an old enamel mug rocking slowly on the countertop, though the air was perfectly still. Those who have spent the night in the quarters often describe a sensation of being watched. One group of documentary filmmakers who visited in the early 2000s claimed that during the night, Their equipment turned on by itself, lights flickered, and a shadow crossed in front of their cameras, even though everyone was accounted for. When reviewing their footage later, they captured a faint voice, a man's voice, saying, "Keep the light burning." Some locals from nearby Unalaska Island believe the spirits of the keepers remain bound to their duty. The isolation, the storms, and the endless responsibility to guide sailors through the dark may have anchored their souls to the very place they once called home. One elder tells of the watchers of Sarakef, ghostly men seen walking the grounds in heavy coats, their faces pale and unreadable. They are said to appear before major storms, as though continuing their work to warn those at sea. In 1972, a visiting Coast Guard helicopter crew stayed overnight after bad weather forced them to ground. According to the flight log, the crew reported hearing someone walking in the hallway outside their sleeping quarters. The footsteps moved back and forth for hours, steady and deliberate. When they opened the door, the sound stopped instantly. The next morning, they found boot prints in the dust leading to the lighthouse, prints that ended halfway up the hill. None of the men could explain what they'd heard, but none of them ever volunteered to return. Even now, despite its desolation, Cape Sarakef draws occasional visitors, historians, adventurers, and those seeking proof of the paranormal. Many who enter the quarters speak of a strange calm at first, followed by a growing unease. The sound of the wind blends with faint murmurs that seem to come from the walls themselves. Some describe hearing the steady rhythm of boots on the floor above them, as though someone were making rounds through the rooms. Others have seen flickering lights through the windows at night, yellow, wavering glows that resemble lanterns being carried by unseen hands. When questioned about these stories, one former Coast Guard technician summed it up simply: "You can feel them there. They never left. It's as if the keepers are still doing their duty, keeping watch through eternity." On the windswept edge of the Gulf of Alaska stands the Cape Yakataga Lighthouse, a lonely tower battered by waves, wind, and time. Built in 1917, it once guided ships safely along one of the most treacherous stretches of coastline in the North Pacific. Today, the building sits mostly abandoned, a fading sentinel overlooking a restless sea. Yet those who visit swear that the lighthouse remains active in its own mysterious way. Ghostly lights are often seen flickering in the lantern room. Spectral figures climb the stairwells at night, and the sound of heavy boots echoes through empty halls. Some even claim that sailors lost offshore appear in the fog, calling out for help before vanishing back into the storm. The story of Cape Yakataga begins with tragedy. The construction of the lighthouse was itself fraught with peril. Workers faced relentless storms, freezing temperatures, and violent waves that would batter the rocky shore without warning. Several men lost their lives during the building process, swept away by the sea or crushed by falling debris. Locals have long believed that the spirits of these men never left the site, bound to the lighthouse they gave their lives to create. When the beacon first lit the night sky, it became a vital guardian for ships navigating between Cordova and Yakutat. The coastline there is riddled with unseen reefs and shifting sandbars, and countless vessels had met their end before the lighthouse was built. For a while, it seemed that Cape Yakataga brought peace to the waters. But soon, strange tales began to circulate among the keepers who lived there. The first reports came from keeper Robert Hanley in 1920. His logbook entries describe odd lights in the fog and the sound of voices calling from the sea. Hanley's assistant, a young man named Thomas Reed, claimed to see figures walking along the shore during heavy weather, men dressed in soaked sailor uniforms, their faces pale and hollow-eyed. When he called out to them, they disappeared into the mist. Reed's final entry, dated November 3, 1921, reads only, "They are at the door again. He vanished that night, and no trace of him was ever found." After Reed's disappearance, new keepers were sent to replace him, but each spoke of the same phenomena. At night, the stairs would creak under unseen feet, and doors would open and close on their own. Some claimed the lantern room would light up even when the power was off, glowing faintly against the storm clouds. Others spoke of hearing the foghorn sound on windless nights, its mournful tone echoing across the waves with no living hand to trigger it. By the 1940s, the lighthouse had earned its reputation as one of the most haunted outposts on the Alaskan coast. During World War II, it was used briefly as a coastal observation station. Soldiers stationed there recorded several chilling experiences. One account described a soldier waking in the middle of the night to see a man standing at the foot of his bunk, dripping with seawater, staring blankly. When he reached for his flashlight, the figure dissolved into mist. Another report mentioned hearing desperate knocking at the door during a gale. When they opened it, the porch was empty, but the sound continued, pounding from within the walls themselves. Locals from Yakutat and Cordova began to refer to the ghostly figures as the drowned. Watch. Fishermen claimed to see them wandering the cliffs or standing near the lighthouse during storms, their lanterns flickering weakly against the darkness. Some said these spirits were the souls of shipwrecked sailors, still seeking rescue after death. The waters near Yakataga have claimed dozens of vessels over the decades, from fishing boats to cargo ships, their crews lost without trace. The idea that their ghosts return to the lighthouse for help seems fitting in a place so bound to tragedy. One particularly famous incident occurred in 1953 when the cargo ship Mary Ethel went missing off the coast near the lighthouse. For 3 nights after the disappearance, the keepers reported seeing lights bobbing in the waves just offshore, like lanterns held by men adrift. They also heard faint cries carried by the wind, pleading for help. Each night, the lights would fade around dawn. Weeks later, the wreckage of the Mary Ethel washed ashore, but none of the crew were found. In the decades that followed, automation gradually replaced the human keepers, and the lighthouse was left to the mercy of the elements. Yet reports of supernatural activity did not fade with the passing years. Hikers, Coast Guard, technicians, and curious explorers who ventured near Cape Yakataga have all described eerie sensations, the feeling of being watched, the sound of footsteps on the stairs and lights flickering in the lantern room despite no working electricity. One visitor in the 1980s described spending the night inside the tower during a storm. He claimed to hear footsteps above him, moving slowly from one side of the lantern room to the other. When he climbed the stairs to investigate, the light in his lantern flickered violently, and a sudden gust of icy air swept past him. He looked up to see a man's shadow outlined against the glass, a tall figure with a cap, standing perfectly still. But when he reached the top, the room was empty. Another chilling story comes from a Coast Guard maintenance crew who landed by helicopter in 2006. They reported seeing faint figures moving on the catwalk outside the tower as they approached. Thinking they were trespassers, the team hurried inside, only to find the building locked and untouched for months. Later that evening, as the fog rolled in, one of the crew heard knocking from the tower door, followed by a voice calling out, "Let us in." When he opened it, nothing was there but the roar of the sea. Those who study Alaska's haunted sites believe the activity at Cape Yakataga is connected not only to the deaths of keepers and sailors, but also to the land itself. The coast near Yakataga has long been regarded as sacred by indigenous peoples, who tell stories of spirits dwelling in the waves, entities that lure travelers astray during storms. According to one legend, the sea keeps the souls of those who perish, but during times of great unrest, it releases them to wander the land once more. Today, the lighthouse still stands, weathered and silent, its glass windows shattered by decades of wind and salt. On clear days, it looks like any other ruin along the Alaskan coast, but when the fog rolls in, it comes alive. The faint glow of lantern light has been seen through the mist, swaying gently as if carried by unseen hands. Voices have been heard calling out names long forgotten, blending with the crash of the waves and the endless moan of the wind. Perched on the rugged cliffs of Hinchinbrook Island, the Cape Hinchinbrook Keeper's House stands as a silent witness to decades of isolation and maritime history. Built to support the lighthouse that guided ships safely along the jagged coast of Alaska, the Keeper's House was once a bustling hub of daily routines, meals cooked, logs recorded, and equipment tended. Today, the building sits mostly abandoned, weather-beaten, and scarred by storms. Yet those who venture inside swear that the house is far from empty. Visitors report hearing footsteps echoing across empty rooms, lights flicking on and off without explanation, and sudden cold spots that seem to follow them through the hallways. Locals claim the spirits of the keepers continue to perform their duties, endlessly tending to a world that has long since moved on. The history of the keeper's house is intertwined with the lighthouse itself. For decades, men and women lived in the house in shifts, keeping the light operational through blizzards, fog, and pounding storms. Life on Hinchinbrook Island was unforgiving. Supplies were scarce, communication with the mainland was limited, and the constant roar of the sea could make even the most experienced keepers uneasy. Several keepers and their families perished over the years due to accidents, illness, and exposure. Some believe that the spirits of those who died on the island never left, bound to the house by duty, loyalty, or perhaps unfinished business. Early accounts of paranormal activity were recorded in the keepers' logs themselves. In 1924, keeper Samuel Lawson wrote of footsteps in the pantry when no one is present and doors swinging open and shut with the force of the wind. Though the storm is calm, his assistant, a young man named Peter Griggs, described seeing lights move along the hallways at midnight and hearing what he called a chorus of whispers coming from empty rooms. By the end of the year, Lawson noted a series of strange occurrences. Objects shifted positions without explanation. Blankets were found tugged from beds, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the kitchen despite no one preparing it. Over time, stories of the haunted keeper's house spread among mariners and island visitors. Some described standing in the living room and feeling as if someone was watching them, a presence unseen but undeniably close. Others reported hearing the metallic clang of lanterns being adjusted, doors opening to rooms that had been locked, and faint laughter echoing through the hallways. One particularly chilling account came from a Coast Guard technician in the 1950s who spent a night on the island during a maintenance visit. He claimed that he awoke to see a shadowy figure standing at the end of the hallway, holding a lantern as though inspecting the house. When he called out, the figure vanished without a trace, leaving only the lingering scent of tobacco smoke in the air. The house is said to be most active during storms. Heavy winds and rain batter the walls, yet visitors report hearing footsteps on floors above when they are alone on the ground level. Lights in the kitchen or hallways flicker with no electricity, and sudden drafts sweep through rooms as if doors and windows have opened themselves. Some explorers claim to hear the sounds of furniture being moved, cupboards opening, and utensils clinking in the kitchen, all while standing in empty rooms. Locals have long warned that the spirits in the keeper's house are not malevolent, but they are insistent. They perform the routines they were once tasked with, regardless of whether anyone is present to witness them. A few particularly persistent stories involve the ghostly appearance of the keepers themselves. Witnesses describe figures in period uniforms, often carrying lanterns or tools, moving through the halls in a methodical manner. Some say the keepers appear to perform inspections of the house and surrounding grounds, checking for hazards, cleaning, or adjusting equipment that no longer exists. One visitor recounted seeing a man sweep the floor of the main hall, step back to admire his work, and then vanish when approached. Another spoke of hearing footsteps climbing the spiral stairs, followed by the faint creak of a door opening and closing, even though the stairwell was empty. Some claim that the spirits are tied not only to the house but to the island itself. Hinchinbrook Island's treacherous coastline has claimed countless ships over the decades, and the lighthouse and its keepers were central to protecting sailors from disaster. Witnesses often report feeling a heightened sense of vigilance in the presence of the apparitions, as though the ghosts of the keepers are still ensuring that the light is tended and the grounds remain in order. One longtime mariner described the experience as being watched over by invisible hands. Careful, deliberate, protective. The haunted reputation of the keeper's house has drawn a mix of curiosity seekers, paranormal investigators, and historians. Those who spend the night inside often come away with similar tales, footsteps echoing when no one is present, lights igniting as if in response to their movement, and sudden drops in temperature that leave even seasoned visitors shivering. Some report whispers calling their names or giving instructions that no one else could hear. A few have fled entirely, unwilling to endure the persistent presence that seems to shadow every movement within the house. Even in modern times, when the lighthouse itself is automated and the need for human keepers has vanished, the house retains its spectral inhabitants. Locals say the spirits are unaware that the world has moved on, continuing routines established decades ago. Whether adjusting lanterns, checking supplies, or pacing the halls, they are caught in a loop of duty, performing tasks they can never complete. The building's empty rooms, once filled with laughter, conversation, and human life, remain animated by echoes of the past, a haunting testament to the isolation, dedication, and tragedy of those who lived and died on Hinchinbrook Island. Perched on the rugged cliffs of Lynn Canal, the Cape Decision Keeper's Quarters stands as a silent testament to the lives of those who once maintained the lighthouse. The building, weathered by decades of storms and relentless winds, now sits abandoned, yet those who venture inside speak of a presence that refuses to leave. Visitors frequently report whispers carried along the hallways, footsteps echoing in empty rooms, and shadowy figures that seem to linger just beyond the edge of vision. Cold drafts move unpredictably through the quarters, and some have claimed that invisible hands brushed against their shoulders as they explored. Doors slam with no wind, lights flicker, and the air itself feels heavy with the weight of memories long past. Many believe that the spirits of the keepers are trapped in time, continuing their watch as they did in life, bound to the very rooms that once sustained them. The keepers' quarters were originally constructed in the early 20th century, designed to house the families and staff who maintained the lighthouse atop the cliffs. Life on Cape Decision was isolated and harsh. Storms often cut the island off from the mainland for days, sometimes weeks, leaving the keepers to endure freezing winds, pounding rain, and relentless snow. Every night, they tended the light, ensuring that passing ships could navigate safely through the treacherous waters of Lynn Canal. While the lighthouse automated in the mid-20th century, the quarters remained largely untouched, a relic of a bygone era. Stories of paranormal activity began shortly after the lighthouse was automated. Workers sent to maintain the quarters reported hearing footsteps in hallways when no one else was present. One engineer recalled ascending the spiral staircase to inspect the upper rooms, only to hear the distinct sound of someone pacing above him, though the floor creaked as if under the weight of a heavy coat. When he reached the top, the hallway was empty, but the echo of footsteps seemed to linger long after he stopped moving. Visitors described similar experiences, faint whispers calling from the walls, the sensation of being watched, and objects shifting positions with no logical explanation. The most common phenomena reported involve shadowy figures. Guests have described seeing forms moving through the hallways, sometimes pausing as though observing, then vanishing when approached. One visitor recounted standing in the dining area and seeing a figure cross the room carrying a lantern, only for the light to disappear when he blinked. Another claimed to see a figure at the top of the stairs, motioning toward a window, before fading into the shadows. The apparitions are described as purposeful rather than threatening, as if the keepers are performing their duties, unaware that they are no longer alive. Cold spots are a frequent occurrence, often coinciding with these apparitions. Visitors report sudden drops in temperature in otherwise calm rooms, their breath visible in the frigid air. Some have described feeling a light touch on their shoulder or arm, only to turn and see no one nearby. Doors slam without wind, cupboards rattle, and footsteps echo on empty floors. Paranormal investigators suggest that the keeper's strong sense of duty may have left a residual energy in the building, a lingering imprint of their daily routines and nightly vigilance. One of the most unnerving aspects of the Cape Decision Keeper's Quarters is the sensation of time shifting. Visitors sometimes describe clocks that stop or move erratically, watches that lose their accuracy, and the feeling that moments stretch or collapse unnaturally. Some believe that the spirits are caught in a temporal loop, endlessly performing tasks and checking the lighthouse as they did when alive. These accounts reinforce the idea that the keepers remain bound to the quarters, unable to leave, continuing their watch over the cliffs and waters of Lynn Canal. Local lore emphasizes that the keepers were meticulous in life and meticulous in death. The spirits are not known to be violent, but they are persistent. Guests report objects being moved, a chair slightly angled differently than before, a book found on the floor that had been neatly placed on a shelf. The atmosphere is heavy with presence, as if the keepers are still overseeing every corner of their former home. Some visitors experience auditory phenomena, the clink of metal tools, the creak of the spiral staircase, and occasional soft murmurs that resemble conversation, though no one else is there. A particularly chilling account comes from a group of historians visiting the quarters during a storm. As they explored the main hall, they heard a door slam violently behind them, even though every window was closed. Turning quickly, they glimpsed a shadow moving along the far wall, pausing at a window as if peering outside. When they called out, there was no response, only the lingering sound of footsteps retreating to the upper floors. One of the group felt a cold hand brush her shoulder as she tried to follow, sending her stumbling toward the exit. The storm outside raged, yet the activity seemed contained within the building. A reminder that the quarters themselves were alive with echoes of the past. Even today, the Cape Decision Keeper's Quarters draws visitors intrigued by its haunted reputation. Photographers, historians, and paranormal enthusiasts report similar experiences: whispers in empty rooms, shadowy figures pacing hallways, and cold spots that follow them from room to room. Some claim to feel the presence of the keepers watching over them, ensuring that every task is done as it would have been in life. Despite the isolation, the building seems animated, bound to the vigilance and dedication of those who once called it home. Sentinel Island Keeper's Quarters, perched on a rocky outcrop in the fog-laden Frederick Sound, is a small, weathered building that has long been abandoned. Though modest in size, the quarters have earned a reputation among sailors, historians, and adventurous travelers for being haunted by the spirits of those who once maintained the nearby lighthouse. Visitors frequently report a range of eerie phenomena, from ghostly laughter echoing down empty hallways to footsteps pacing the floors when no one is present. The building seems almost alive, responding to the presence of the living with inexplicable movements, flickering lights, and shadows that vanish when approached. Some explorers have fled in terror, convinced that the spirits of the lighthouse keepers continue their duties even in death. The keepers' quarters were built in the early 1900s to house the lighthouse staff who tended to the beacon on Sentinel Island. Life on the island was isolated, surrounded by icy waters, dense fog, and relentless storms that battered the structure throughout the year. The keepers and their families faced long, dark winters with little contact with the mainland. Every night, they would climb to the lighthouse, ensuring the light shone steadily for passing ships. Stories of the hardships faced by these keepers are intertwined with the building itself, and some believe that the emotional weight of their lives left a lingering imprint on the quarters. Those who venture inside today often describe hearing faint laughter echoing from empty rooms, a sound that rises and falls as if carried on the wind but has no apparent source. Footsteps are commonly reported, sometimes following visitors down long hallways, pacing floors, or climbing stairs where no one is present. Doors creak open and shut without warning, and lights that no longer have electricity flare on and off, casting moving shadows along the walls. Some visitors describe an uncanny sensation of being watched, a pressure that seems to follow them from room to room, growing stronger in certain corners or near particular windows. Spectral figures are perhaps the most unsettling phenomena reported at Sentinel Island Keeper's Quarters. Guests have described seeing shadows moving along hallways or standing at the tops of stairs, sometimes appearing to perform mundane tasks, adjusting objects, sweeping floors, or carrying lanterns. One historian recounted entering the main room only to see a figure at a window, its back to him, gazing outward toward the sound of the water crashing against the rocks below. When he tried to approach, the figure disappeared into thin air, leaving the room cold and silent. Another visitor described watching a figure pace the floor while holding what appeared to be a notebook or log, turning occasionally as if to check on someone entering the room, and then vanishing completely when directly confronted. Cold drafts are a frequent occurrence within the quarters, often coinciding with the appearance of ghostly figures or footsteps. Visitors report sudden chills, their breath visible in the icy air, even during warmer months. Some have felt light touches on their arms or shoulders, as if unseen hands are guiding them through the rooms. Paranormal investigators suggest that the strong sense of duty and long hours spent tending the lighthouse may have left a residual energy within the building, creating the sensation of movement and presence even in the absence of living beings. Objects moving without explanation are another hallmark of the haunting. Chairs have been found slightly angled differently than when visitors last left them, books or papers displaced across desks, and doors ajar when previously closed. The occurrences seem purposeful rather than chaotic, as if the spirits are continuing their routines, endlessly repeating tasks from a lifelong past. Visitors often report hearing soft murmurs or whispers that rise from the floors or walls, unintelligible yet unmistakably human. One particularly unnerving account comes from a group of sailors seeking shelter from a sudden storm. As they explored the quarters, they heard the sound of footsteps ascending the narrow staircase. Although only two of them were present, a faint high-pitched laugh echoed down the hall, prompting them to freeze in place. One sailor turned and saw a shadowy figure holding a lantern, walking along the floorboards before fading into the wall. The group quickly exited the building, claiming they could feel the gaze of unseen eyes following them until they reached the safety of their boat. Visitors also describe a shifting sense of time within the quarters. Clocks sometimes stop, and watches become inaccurate, creating the impression that the building exists slightly outside the normal flow of hours. Some theorists believe the spirits are trapped in a temporal loop endlessly, performing duties from when the lighthouse was fully staffed, while others suggest that the lingering energy reacts to the presence of visitors, intensifying when someone intrudes into the space. Despite the eerie experiences, Sentinel Island keepers, quarters draws, historians, photographers, and paranormal enthusiasts intrigued by its haunted reputation. Many report similar phenomena: ghostly laughter echoing in empty rooms, shadowy figures disappearing when approached, and cold drafts that seem to follow visitors from room to room. Some claim to hear whispers, footsteps, or the faint movement of objects, reinforcing the notion that the keepers never truly left the building. Even in the harsh isolation of Frederick Sound, the quarters retained the memory of human lives once devoted to vigilance, labor, and survival. Eldred Rockkeeper's house, perched on the icy cliffs of Lynn Canal, has long been a beacon for both sailors and curious visitors, drawn to its remote, haunted history. Built to accommodate the lighthouse keepers who maintained the Eldred Rock Lighthouse, the house stands isolated amid the relentless Alaskan storms and frigid waters. Though abandoned for decades, the house has never truly been empty. Guests report lights turning on without power, objects shifting across floors and tables, and shadows moving silently along the walls. Some claim the keepers continue their daily routines, unaware that they have long since passed from this world, forever bound to the routines and vigilance that once defined their lives. Those who first set foot in the house often feel a chilling sense of presence. The air carries a cold draft, sometimes accompanied by the faint smell of coal smoke from the long-extinguished stove. Visitors frequently report seeing flickering lights in the upper windows, even when the house has no electricity, and shadows crossing doorways as if someone is pacing the hallways. The haunting is subtle. At first a faint creak, the whisper of wind against a loose shutter, but intensifies as evening falls and the Alaskan fog rolls in, enveloping the house in a veil of gray. Inside, objects move seemingly on their own. Chairs have been found at angles different from where they were left, books toppled from shelves, and drawers slowly open as if someone is searching for something. Guests have recounted seeing a kettle slide across the counter, only to find no one in the room. Many visitors describe hearing footsteps pacing the floors above them, the rhythmic sound of boots echoing across the old wooden planks. Some have even claimed to see a faint figure in a weathered uniform climbing the staircase to the lighthouse, only for the shape to dissolve into the walls when approached. The keeper's house is believed to be a nexus of lingering energy, left behind by the men and women who once lived and worked there. Life on Eldred Rock was harsh and isolated. Keepers were responsible for maintaining the light in all weather conditions, ensuring that the perilous Lynn Canal remained navigable for ships. Storms battered the building with unrelenting force, and winter nights were long and dark. It is said that the routine, discipline, and dedication of these keepers left a permanent imprint on the house, creating an environment where their spirits continue to inhabit the spaces they once maintained. Many visitors describe a sense of being watched, a presence that shifts just at the edge of perception. Shadows appear in corners, lingering for moments before vanishing, leaving only the sensation of someone having been there. Some guests have felt cold hands brush their skin or pressure on their shoulders, as though a keeper is guiding them through the rooms. In several accounts, whispers are heard, murmurs that cannot be attributed to wind or structural sounds. One guest reported hearing a low, urgent voice calling out instructions about the lighthouse lamp, though the building had been empty for decades. The house also exhibits phenomena that suggest time itself is warped within its walls. Clocks often stop or display the wrong time, and electronic devices behave erratically. Guests report that the usual rhythm of day and night seems distorted, as if the keeper's routines persist in a loop, independent of the modern world. Paranormal investigators suggest that these disturbances are residual energy, echoes of the intense focus and discipline required to maintain the lighthouse, now replaying continuously. One particularly chilling account comes from a small group of explorers who arrived during a stormy evening. As they entered the main room, a lantern suddenly flickered to life, casting moving shadows across the walls. A chair shifted as though someone had just stood, and faint footsteps echoed from the staircase to the lighthouse. One of the group saw a figure in a long coat moving with deliberate pace across the floorboards, only to vanish when called by name. The group left hurriedly, reporting the sensation that they had intruded upon a world still inhabited by the dead. A world where the keepers continued their nightly rounds without end. Even in daylight, the house conveys an eerie sense of occupancy. Shadows are reported moving behind frosted windows, and items appear slightly out of place, as if someone had just been there. Visitors have described hearing the distant echo of a foghorn or the creak of a gate, although no external source exists. It is as if the keepers' routines are ongoing, tied to the cyclical tasks of maintenance and vigilance that define their lives. The Eldred Rock Keeper's house stands as a testament to the endurance of human habit, duty, and presence. Though the building has long been abandoned, the spirits within appear to continue their labor, tending to the lighthouse, moving objects, pacing hallways, and maintaining a watch over the treacherous waters of Lynn Canal. Visitors often report feeling an undeniable mixture of awe and dread, sensing the proximity of lives once lived with absolute dedication. Some flee in fear, while others linger, captivated by the mysterious energy that lingers in every room, corner, and window. Cape Spencer Keeper's house, perched on the jagged cliffs of Prince William Sound, is a place where isolation and the relentless fury of nature have intertwined with the supernatural. For decades, the house served as a home and workplace for lighthouse keepers, men and women who devoted their lives to guiding ships safely through the treacherous waters. Today, though abandoned, the house continues to draw the curious, the brave, and the unnerved, all drawn by whispers of lingering spirits. Visitors report ghostly figures pacing the decks, lanterns glowing without power, and footsteps echoing through empty halls. Some insist the spirits are bound to the lighthouse itself, forever watching the seas for vessels that will never arrive. Those who first approach the house often feel the raw isolation of its location. Cape Spencer juts sharply into the cold waters of the Sound, surrounded by jagged rocks and the ever-present roar of waves crashing below. The wind carries a biting chill that seeps into the bones, and fog often blankets the cliffs, wrapping the house in a veil of gray. Amid this harsh environment, the keeper's house stands stoic, a lone sentinel overlooking the water. Visitors speak of a palpable presence as soon as they step onto the property, a feeling of eyes watching, of being followed by unseen footsteps. Inside, the house is a theater of spectral activity. Lanterns have been reported to glow and dim without any electrical source. Guests have described the light flickering across the walls, casting shadows that seem to move independently of natural motion. Some say the lanterns respond to their presence, illuminating areas where the air feels thick with energy. Visitors have also noticed objects shifting on their own chairs, sliding across the floor, books tumbling from shelves, and drawers opening as though someone were searching for something unseen. Footsteps are the most commonly reported phenomenon. The creak of heavy boots on the wooden floors, pacing in hallways, or along staircases, has been heard by nearly every visitor who ventures inside after dark. Some have followed the sound, only to find the hallways empty, the rooms silent. Others report glimpsing figures in old uniforms, moving with deliberate purpose along the decks or through the corridors. These apparitions vanish when approached, leaving only a lingering chill and the unmistakable impression that someone or something has just passed by. The history of the keeper's house adds weight to its haunting. Life at Cape Spencer was isolated, harsh, and unyielding. Keepers worked in all conditions, maintaining the lighthouse, repairing lanterns, and ensuring that the rocky waters below were safe for navigation. Storms were frequent and violent, and the remoteness of the location meant that help was always far away. Some believe the spirits present today are those of keepers who never truly left, their dedication so profound that they remain tied to the lighthouse, continuing to perform nightly rounds, even in death. Whispers are another chilling aspect of the haunting. Visitors have reported hearing voices in empty rooms, low murmurs that seem to issue from the walls themselves. Often these whispers call out names or give indistinct instructions about the lighthouse and its lamp. A few explorers have said they felt unseen hands brushing against their shoulders, guiding them down hallways or away from certain rooms. Some have interpreted these interactions as the spirits attempting to communicate, a continuation of the caretaking duties that defined their lives. Time inside the keeper's house appears fluid and distorted. Visitors have noted clocks stopping or displaying impossible times, and electronic devices malfunctioning inexplicably. Even the rhythm of day and night seems altered. The sun may shine outside, while the house feels submerged in shadow, or fog may obscure the cliffs in mid-afternoon, heightening the sense of otherworldliness. Paranormal investigators often suggest that this is residual energy, a playback of the keeper's repetitive routines, trapped within the walls of the house. One particularly unsettling account comes from a group of explorers who arrived during a dense fog. As they entered the main hall, a lantern suddenly ignited, casting moving shadows across the walls. The soft creak of boots paced the upstairs floorboards, and one member glimpsed a faint figure ascending the spiral staircase leading to the lighthouse. When they called out, the figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving the explorers shaken and hurriedly departing the property. Many report leaving with the eerie impression that they had intruded upon an ongoing routine, a world of duty and vigilance continuing beyond death. Even in daylight, the house maintains its unnerving aura. Shadows are reported behind frosted windows, and items are often found slightly out of place. Some visitors claim to hear distant sounds of the foghorn or the clatter of shutters. Though no source exists, it is as if the keeper's vigilance persists, a phantom repetition of the tasks they once performed so diligently. Cape Spencer Keeper's House is not a place of malevolence, but of enduring presence. The lights, the footsteps, the whispers, and the shifting objects all tell the story of keepers bound to their duty, unable to leave even in death. Visitors report a mixture of dread and fascination, sensing the proximity of lives that once revolved entirely around the lighthouse and the perilous waters it safeguarded. Some leave quickly, unnerved by the experience, while others linger, captivated by the enigmatic energy that lingers in every corner and hallway. And there you have it, 25 haunted lighthouses in Alaska where keepers never left, where the wind carries whispers of the past, lanterns glow without explanation, and spirits patrol decks long after death. These lighthouses remind us that some sentinels never rest, bound to their duty by tragedy, storm, and isolation. If this journey along Alaska's haunted coasts sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another ghostly tale. Until next time, tread carefully on rocky shores, because some keepers never truly leave, and some ghosts still watch from the light.